Morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the Public Safety Appropriations Subcommittee to order. And welcome everybody. I'd first like to apologize. I hate that we had to do this on Friday on our day off, but the truth of the matter is, since we had to Zoom, we couldn't get a room where we had the capability to Zoom to the public and for 4 hours. So we had to take the vacancy that occurred when everybody left today. So we've got a lot to do today. As you can see from the agenda, most every agency has from 10 to 15 minutes. So it's pretty quick. I'd like to stay on schedule as best we can and hopefully finish up about noon. We've got a lot to do, and having sat on the other side as an agency head, I know it's very important that you be properly funded and have the ability to carry out your duties throughout the year. So we're going to get started today with the Georgia Public Defender Council. Are we on?
We're on. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Ma'am?
Can you hear us?
Okay, we're getting you now. Okay.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Omotayo Ali, and I'm here with your Executive Director for GPDC, and I'm here with Terry Rayford, our CFO. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all. The last time that I should have met with you all, I had a family emergency, and I could not be on camera. And I'm very happy to be here today.
I remember that. You were standing out in the parking lot at the hospital by your car.
I was. It was in front of the emergency room. Today, we're really blessed that I'm able to be here on camera today. It is a blessing. Good morning to all of you, and thank you very much.
Well, I hope your family members recovered.
Well, you know, we're almost at the end of we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's a blessing today that I can be here. We're very grateful. Thank you for asking. Good morning, Tayo Ali, again on behalf of the GPDC, Georgia Public Defender Council. Just hoping to bring your attention to our needs and all the achievements that we have had over the last 11 months that I have joined you. I was appointed just recently, just short of a year, and it has been a privilege to have been able to serve this agency. In the interest of time, because I heard that we just have like 15 minutes and you want to be on time, and I will make sure that I do that. We have sent you an annual report, and that annual report just tells you everything that we have done in the last 10 to 11 months. And everything that we have done, we have been able to close a $2.2 million deficit that I found when I came to the agency. We have been able to relocate from a long-time place of residency, which was a state bar. We're now in the government building 270 Washington. We've been able to restructure some of our units for efficiency. We've been able to do all of this without following one single attorney, and we've been able to keep all our employees working. And everything that we have done over the last year is all about not so much cost cutting, but making sure that we can manage our budget as efficiently as we should, so that we can repurpose the funding that we have to continue to manage our services. And so we come to you today because we still have some needs. And whenever I want to say this, whenever I come to you, it's just because we just cannot find the funds in-house to manage whatever that process is. And so I'm just going to go quickly and as efficiently as I can go over the requests. Last year, when we had the budget cut, we lost $400,000. And that $400,000 we're asking back so we can fund employee leave and retirement payouts. When we lose employees now, whether because they find they go to another employment or because they retire, we have to wait until we can get enough salary savings to pay for whatever the leave payout is. That is really, it's causing a lot of backlog in the courtroom. It's making it such that we cannot keep up with the workload. The workload is not manageable at that time. We're piling the same workload on the attorneys who are in the courtroom or the employees who are left in that unit. And that is creating a lot of job performance gaps. And so we're asking respectfully, today we have, the leave payout that we have today is 358,991, which means we must keep these positions vacant until we recoup this money from vacant positions. It is creating a lot of problems with work performance. Whatever we save with leave payout, we're losing in efficiency. And when we lose money in efficiency, you know that translates into dollars all day long. And so we're asking respectfully if we could get that $400,000 back, we can use it to fund employee leave and retirement payouts.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Well, I have a question. I was letting everybody else go first, but in looking at the sheet here, you got down here under 37.2.1, increase funds for a proposed new judicial circuit in Columbia County.
Yes, sir.
And I've gone back and I've looked, and you know, there's no, and my sense is that it's probably going to come out of the Augusta circuit if they move, but there's no funding for DAs or a judge. And, you know, I've never heard that that's going to occur. I don't know. You have some assurance that they're going to create that new circuit? We got 3 other circuits in here that getting new judges, but I hadn't seen anything for Columbia County to make Columbia County by itself a circuit.
I'm not sure what's going to happen to that bill at the end of the day, but when and if it passes, we're going to need some funding. Both yes, sir, both statutory funding to fund the 3 courtrooms that will be in that new Columbia County. We don't have that money yet. The governor's office has put, I think Terry has
377,259.
Yeah. Yes, sir. And that does not fund the, it will not fund the attorneys for us. It will not fund all the necessary resources that we're going to need to effectively provide for that county. And so we come to you for the gap between what the governor's office has already provided for us and what we know we're going to need. And that leaves us a gap of
$646,000.
So that's why we're still asking for $646,000 so that we can make sure that if that bill passes, we will have we'll have adequate funding to fund that Columbia County.
Okay, anybody else got any questions? If not, we appreciate you coming on board and giving us your explanations. Thank you very much, and hope you have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
Somebody had a question?
Mm-hmm. May I ask a question, sir? May I ask a quick question? May I ask a quick question? I have other requests that I have on my list. I'm just going to assume that you have the PowerPoint and you have the request and you don't want me to go through them.
No, we've got them. I think we have everything we need.
Okay, sir. And if you have any questions later on for me to clarify, I hope you reach out to me and I will provide that.
Certainly, we certainly will. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I see you're already on here, Justice Boggs. We're a little bit early, but I'd like to go ahead and get started if you can. Pleasure having you here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you very well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for the opportunity to present on behalf of the Standing Committee on Budget of the Judicial Council, which I chair. I'm honored to have Cynthia Clanton here with us today, who you know is the Director of the Administrative Office of the Courts, and also Malia Wilson, who is our Chief Budget Officer, as well as several others who I'll introduce as we move along. Being cognizant of time, I'm going to just get right into our budget. This appears, our budget, the Judicial Council budget is in Section 6 of your budget documents. I have 7 requests, 5 of which are going to be ongoing continuing funding requests, 2 of which are going to be one-time funding requests. I will go through these in order, starting with Section 6.4.1, which is a request that comes from the Supreme Court Committee on Access to Justice and is the Civil Legal Services to Victims of Domestic Violence program. These funds, which have been appropriated by the legislature since 1999, provide funds to nonprofit agencies to provide civil legal services to victims of domestic violence throughout Georgia. Prior to last year's budget cut, the funding for that program was $2.5 million. We were cut over $1 million last year. I think we're being very conservative, frankly, and asking for $175,000 to be restored to that budget. But to give you some kind of idea, several nonprofits in Georgia, but including Georgia Legal Services, which provides services to 154 counties outside Metro Atlanta, and Atlanta Legal Aid, which provides services to 5 Metro Atlanta counties, apply for and have received these funds over the years. The money's traditionally been used and will continue to be used to provide direct legal services to victims of domestic violence. That includes helping these victims obtain and reinstate protective orders, obtain divorce and child custody matters, child support, assistance in obtaining benefits and housing, and so forth. I have provided to Brian for distribution to each of the committee members a flyer, a one-page flyer that demonstrates some of the, I think, pertinent information that grant program has handled over the last several years. You will note that for FY20, the grantees that received that money appropriated by the state provided services for over 3,300 protective order related cases. They protected over 6,000 women in this state. 3,000 children were helped. 691 victims received custody of their children. And importantly, it also saved approximately $15 million to the state. It is our contention that without this additional funding, and truly we would like to get back, and I will just alert you that if you consider this favorably, we're going to continue to ask till we can get this back to the 2.5 pre-cut number. But without these funds, nearly 10,000 Georgians would be without assistance when trying to escape a violent situation. So we would ask your favorable consideration for an add back to the legal services for victims of domestic violence, $175,000, which is line item 6.4.1. Next, I move to a second grant program that is administered by the Administrative Office of the Courts that you'll find in your documents at 6.4.2, which comes from the Supreme Court Committee on Justice for Children. Many of you are familiar with the Georgia Legal Services for Kinship Care Families program that was funded a few years ago. It too took a significant hit last year. We are asking for in this budget $100,000 to restore some of that cut. That enhancement would provide additional grant funds to nonprofit organizations for attorneys to provide legal services to kinship caregivers throughout Georgia. Kinship caregivers, just so you know, really refers to full-time non-parental care of children by grandparents, relatives, and sometimes family friends. I know you, like me, you're all aware that there are many families in Georgia that are raising children that are not their own, but those families are doing a very good job, and those children are therefore being kept out of the foster care system. You should know that these funds go to provide lawyers to help secure legal custody for these caregivers, ensure that these caregivers have the appropriate documents to get these children enrolled in school and get them medical care. Additionally, the attorneys provide access to financial benefits, healthcare support, educational support, and housing. I too provided a flyer to Mr. Groom to distribute to each of you so that you could see some of the numbers that had been generated just off the funds that you have provided in the past. You should know that for the 15-month period from July of 19 through September of last year, almost 1,400 children were served with your funds. 960 cases were handled. You should know, and I think this is telling, that 654 of those cases were for grandparents raising children. Of the cases that these lawyers worked, 58% of them involved formalizing legal relationships through adoptions, guardianship, legal custodial arrangements. To give you a breadth of the work, the nonprofit providers provided services in 79 counties to these families. 57% of the cases were for families that lived outside Metro Atlanta. We estimate that the state has saved in excess of $5 million through the monies that you have appropriated by avoiding the foster care per diems. That many of these children would be in foster care, and you know the foster care per diem starts at about $9,200 a year and then goes up depending on the age of the child. I also will tell you, just as anecdotally, but is also on this sheet, that as of May of 2019, there were 11,489 children in Georgia in foster care. Fortunately, that number's less than what I reported to you last time. So we think this program is working really well, and we would ask for your favorable consideration of an increase of $100,000 in that grant program that is funded by the AOC. Next, I draw your attention to section 6.4.3, which is the funding we are requested, $243,945 to continue to fund the juvenile data exchange program. Judge Bobby Simmons and Christy King are both online if you have any questions, but just shortly, I'll tell you that the Juvenile Data Exchange, or JDEX as it is referred to, is a statewide repository of data related to juvenile delinquency matters. This enhancement request will allow for the day-to-day operation of JDEX to continue for use by juvenile courts. It'll allow JDEX to increase the number of user groups, expand JDEX access to other appropriate stakeholders, and provide anonymized statewide juvenile justice data and analytics to state, regional, and local decision makers. JDEX, you should know, for the first time allowed our juvenile courts across the state to access a unified repository of juvenile delinquency data to ensure best practices in juvenile justice settings. In short, it would allow judges to know what's going on with this individual in other jurisdictions that may not have shared their data with that judge, and that judge would need to know criminal history, for example, and other such data in making decisions on sentencing and otherwise. You should also know that JDEX is required through statutes passed by this General Assembly to comply with certain statutory data collection requirements for juvenile courts, including a predisposition risk assessment as required by statute, and that this we're asking that you continue to fund that program, and the request this year is $243,945. Next, I will move, and I will tell you also that without that funding, we would be unable to continue to provide services to 159 counties. So it is crucial that we get that funding. Next, I'll move to section 6.4.4, which is the Committee on Judicial Workload Assessment. I know that Judge David Emerson and Stephanie Hines are both here if you have questions. This is a one-time funding request. It is in the amount of $236,113. This enhancement is how the Judicial Council will update the formula that it currently uses to measure judicial workload in Georgia courts. The funding will be used to contract with the National Center for State Courts to perform this assessment. The funding will allow work on a comprehensive review, update, and extension of Georgia's judicial weighted caseload system to bring it in line with state-of-the-art practices and reflect current developments in statutory and case law that impact judicial workloads. I will tell you that during the COVID-19 pandemic, the current weighted caseload system really is obsolete. We are operating off a 2017 assessment currently with the requests that you have pending before the legislature currently. A clear measure, and I think any judge would tell you this, and anyone that has worked on the Judicial Workload Assessment Committee or been a judge like me and participated in a workload assessment would tell you that a clear measure of court workload is essential to determine how many judicial officers are needed to resolve the cases coming before Georgia's superior courts. This study would systemically address the number of superior court judges required to handle workload. The study would be applicable and used by all the state superior courts. More than 40 states in the country currently use a weighted caseload model. And as I mentioned earlier, this model has been assessed and reevaluated many times in the past, most recently in 2017. And so we would ask for a one-time funding to contract with NCSC to conduct this evaluation of our program to ensure the validity and accuracy of that data. That is $236,113. Those are the items that are in the tracking sheet, Mr. Chairman. I now move to some other items that are very important to AOC that are not included in the tracking sheet. One is an IT desktop support position. We're asking for $185,254. I'm sorry, that's the total of non-tracking sheet items, but the IT desktop position is $88,654. Ben Luke is here from the AOC if you have any questions, but you should know that not unlike any other state agency during COVID, the AOC has hosted more than 117 Judicial Council related virtual meetings since March of 2020. That's a 650% increase in the demand for technology and support. Because of the increased demand for technology, we need a dedicated desktop support individual to assist. That person would be charged with troubleshooting and resolving technical issues, supporting training and provisioning and deploying hardware. Currently, we're having to use other people within the AOC to provide this service, and they have full-time obligations. And so we really need that assistance and would appreciate your favorable consideration of that ongoing $88,654,000 request. Next, non-tracking sheet request is a request for $75,000 in ongoing funding to fund the Georgia Courts Registrar, commonly referred to as GCR. The House and Senate, you should know, just this week agreed to fund a quarter of that for this current amended budget. And so in order to annualize that, we're asking for $75,000 in the upcoming budget to annualize the request. The registrar, you should know, maintains a membership database very similar to the State Bar of Georgia. They house records for court professionals such as court reporters, interpreters, and court neutrals and process servers. We call that repository the registrar. They offer a paperless, sort of streamless registration and certification solution for all of those various court professionals. We need the requested funds to upgrade and maintain the registrar and to keep records safe and not subject to hacking. The application's code base will soon, as I understand, be at end of life, and upgrading is essential to maintaining the security of that program. So that is a ongoing request of $75,000, and again, a quarter of that funding for the current year was included in the amended FY21 budget. In addition, and lastly, I go to the last one-time funding request, and this is for the Child Support Collaborative Grant. It is a request of one-time funding of $21,600. Every 4 years, the federal government requires states to perform a study to update child support guidelines. The commission does this through an economic study. Statutorily, the commission is required to determine if the child support guidelines or obligation tables result in appropriate awards. We staff the Georgia Child Support Commission at the AOC, and the AOC is asking the Georgia Department of Human Services, that is the grantor of the federal grant, for an additional $60,000 in FY22 to perform the required study, but there's a 36% state match requirement. So the AOC needs an additional $21,600 for a one-time state match requirement to meet this state match requirement. So, Mr. Chairman, I know I went through that quickly. I hope that was okay. I'm happy to answer questions or defer those questions to others. I'll also tell you that part of the Judicial Council budget that I handle includes the Judicial Qualifications Commission. And traditionally, it's been my practice, I turn the podium over now to Chuck Boring, the Executive Director of the JQC, to present his portion of the Judicial Council budget if there are no other questions.
I've got a few questions, but I'd like to put it out to committee first. Anybody on the committee got any questions for the judge?
Mr. Chairman, it's James Burchett. How are you?
I'm good.
I've got a question. Justice Boggs, thank you for that overview, thorough overview of the budget. There are a couple measures floating around the House that would change the age for juveniles from 17 to 18, put an increased number of cases on the juvenile courts. Is there any? Do you think there'll be any implication to the budget in that scenario if that measure was to pass?
mean, thank you, Representative Burchett and Chairman Burchett. The answer is I don't know. I would imagine yes. I would imagine that when you add an additional volume of cases to our already burdened juvenile judge caseload, that we would probably need additional juvenile judges. I'm guessing at that. I don't know. That would be something that the Judicial Council would look at, and certainly the Juvenile Council Committee would probably also want to weigh in on that as well. They would be more appropriately probably to answer the question as to what burden that would place on their current level of resources that they have. I would imagine, as you would too, I would imagine that if you add a volume of cases to a court, you're going to get an increase in services to those individuals. So it's the best way I can answer the question, but the Juvenile Court Judges Council, I'm sure, would like to weigh in.
I appreciate that, Justice Boggs. I'll touch base offline with them and you again, if you don't mind. We need to consider that certainly when considering that piece of legislation. I thank you. Thank you again, Justice Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else got any questions? I've got a couple here, and just for clarification's sake, the increased funds for grants for legal services for domestic violence, is that the funds that come out of CJCC?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, I've been getting a lot of calls about the women's homes, and I used to work at CJCC for years, and okay.
Yeah, we're aware of your work over there and really good work over there, but that's a separate bucket of money, and this is purely for a grant program. Does not go through CJCC at all.
I just received myriad phone calls over the.
I imagine.
Well, they got a lot of federal funds, and the federal government's cut off the grants, and they're struggling for money to continue their
yes, sir.
Advocacy. But and the kinship families, I just got to tell you, having come to the law enforcement community, I've watched this forever, and having some contact with people who are relatives is the world of good. Whether they live in house or they just are advocates for them, I think that's very positive. But on the dedicated IT desktop, 21,600, does the court think that they're going to continue after COVID is over, if it's ever over, to utilize this method of communications as much as they do now? Or
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that's the $64 million question, or in this case, the $88,000 question. I think, I think that a lot of us have determined that we can do a lot of things remotely that we have been doing in person. In-person seminars, in-person CLEs, in-person ICJEs are all expensive. And so my guess is that we will continue to have a lot of meetings virtually in the future. Georgia is a large state. I come from a part of the state that's 250 miles from the capital, and I know a lot of people want to take advantage of the ability, like your members are today, to participate in meetings from their homes. Cynthia Clanton, the director of the AOC, is online if she wants to respond in any more detail. But my guess is that maybe not at the same rate, but that we will continue to probably now have evolved into a new method of service delivery that includes online meetings that will require a lot of IT desktop support that frankly was not built into our budget before.
yeah, I was just asking that because I think it's universally used. Everybody's, I got a little age on me, and it wasn't part of my maturation process, but I can see its effectiveness. And certainly everybody got to go home today except me and do this. and it's, I think if I'd have had them stay here on their day off, I don't think I would have gotten any new friends.
Well, just to give you an example, Mr. Chairman, we're still holding at the Supreme Court since March. All of our oral arguments, all of them have been held virtually. All of our bank conferences have been held virtually. And so even the judiciary has accommodated sort of this new virtual environment in a very, I think in a very safe way and very responsible way.
Okay, Ms. Boring, I've talked to you a couple times this week. So
yes, sir.
Give us your spiel. I'm very familiar with JQC and what they do. And
Great. Well, yeah. Good morning, Chairman Colonel Hitchens and everybody here. Since everybody knows what we do, I have some slides on a PowerPoint that I will scoot through and just skip through since you all know what we do, and then I will make my pitch just so you all know. What I am asking for is the same budget that was passed through last year through this subcommittee before the pandemic shut everything down. I am new to this job in that last year I'd been about 2 months into it. Now I'm a year and 2 months. So what I said last year in asking for this budget increase holds even more true now. These are not wants, these are needs. So I'll get right to it. You all know what we do. We regulate over 1,600 judges statewide. As Justice Boggs said, it's a very large state. We have more counties than any other state in the nation other than Texas. We regulate all levels of court, from the Supreme Court to a part-time municipal court judge down in Americus. We regulate candidates that aren't even judicial officers yet, and also the conduct of law clerks, staff attorneys, and others can implicate the work of the judges as well. Currently, from staffing standpoint, we only have 3 full-time staff members: myself, the deputy director, who's an attorney, and our administrative assistant. Since I've taken over, we've actually reduced our cost for full-time staff around $40,000 since December of 19. This budget increase we're asking for is not putting in any pay increases for the people we have here. Just so you know, we are trying to do what is best for this agency as a whole. Looking at our workload, getting down to why we need additional funds, our workload has increased not only over the past few years since the JQC was reconstituted, but in the past 2 years and through the pandemic. Look at 2018, 363 complaints, 2019, 525. That was a 45% increase. And it not only held, but it increased during the pandemic. We had 535 complaints that we had to process and investigate last year alone. By comparison, the Office of Inspector General, who does great work and has a much greater budget and personnel, they actually had 400 complaints to investigate last year. Some of the other things we've done through this pandemic over the past year and continue to do, we've been a part, and I personally have been a part of the COVID-19 task force for the judiciary in helping the judiciary navigate the new problems that we've had. We've had legal challenges over the past 2 years to the JQC's confirmation process when it was originally constituted. I personally, taking over as director, have handled that, whereas in the past we've had to employ outside counsel. And in addition to the enforcement angle, we also provide daily ethics advice to judges and attorneys statewide. I don't think a day passes that I don't get an email, a text, or a call from a judge in a jurisdiction asking for advice on things that there is no precedent for. We are only one of 9 states in the country that actually handle enforcement and the ethics inquiries that we do. So also this past year, even during the pandemic, we do presentations and training for other agencies and all the judiciary. I personally conducted 19 trainings and presentations to all levels of courts, state agencies, and Senate staff and attorneys that practice within state government. Getting down to brass tacks, what I did as far as giving you all an idea of our resources and staffing and what we do compared to other like agencies. I spoke with the National Center for Judicial Ethics and talked to them about getting an idea from similar sister type agencies and what they do. I not only spoke and got the publicly available statistics for some of these states, but I spoke individually with the directors of a number of these states. And just as a matter of comparison, I'm just going to go through a couple of these other states and what they do compared to what the bang for the buck that you all are getting. For instance, the state of Michigan is a pretty even comparison. They have about the same number of complaints per year. They have many less judges. They actually have the state bar that give out formal opinions and deal with that part that we deal with within our agency. They have a full-time staff of 8, including 4 attorneys and 1 contract attorney, and a budget of $1.4 million compared to our budget last year, which has been $798,000. We are section 6.5 on your tracking sheet as well. Louisiana, which is another southeastern state, they've got less complaints, many less judges, and they have a staff of 14. They've broken their agency down into 2 parts, one that does investigation and one that does policy and advice. They have a budget of $1.9 million. Florida, they have a similar number of complaints, a few more. They have less judges, and they only deal with enforcement. They don't deal with inquiries, training, campaign issues. And I can tell you, and my deputy director can tell you, for about 3 months during election season, it is all campaign all day with complaints and trying to deal with ethics issues with campaigns. Their budget is right about what we're asking for. Washington, again, another example, they have less complaints, less judges. double twice the staff and about twice the budget. And I've got a couple of other examples, but I think you all get the point. What we did to get here from 2019 to adapt, we had to make these difficult personnel decisions, which we gladly did to make this, to work through the budget tightness that we've had and to make this agency efficient. I cut one of the staff's, I cut my own salary, one of our other positions' salary, and brought in somebody with more experience for the same price or same salary that we had as far as deputy director. Increased workload, I've gone through that. Increased effectiveness. This is one thing I just wanted to point out. You know, our job is twofold. It's to advise the judiciary, help them, and educate, because ideally we would have no judicial misconduct or no even complaints of judicial misconduct, but that's unfortunately not the world we live in. Since I took over in December of 2019, we've had 10 judges, just for an example, that have resigned while we've been involved. Some of them, these are 3 examples I have of judges who not only resigned, but agreed publicly to never seek judicial office again. One was a judge who had sexually harassed court personnel. Another was a judge who was tipping off an acquaintance to a law enforcement investigation. And another one is a judge who was stealing from his own court up in North Georgia. And just so you all know, when I'm done with this presentation, I'm getting in a car and driving to another county outside the metro area where we have a judge who has recently made some very inappropriate comments to a young man in court that we have to deal with. So as director, with our resources, this is something, not only the director stuff like budget, we are all hands on deck all the time. Some of the current investigations we have are complex and high profile, of the sort this agency has really never tackled. Some are pending and there's some that are not public yet, but we've done a lot with our case management system. I don't know if you all remember, we had some issues over the past years before I took over with retention of records and that type of thing. We're really stressing having a new case management system and working toward, you know, really creating one of the best agencies in the country. So what our budget request is, in 2021, we were at 798, 820. And the positions we have are director, deputy, and administrative assistant. What we're asking for is $1,049,000. That's about a $250,000 budget increase, a little less than that compared to 2020. And this would be adding 2 staff attorneys. In speaking with the other agencies, they utilize staff attorneys, some of them in investigative roles, which I think is appropriate in these types of investigations, because attorneys are more familiar with the judicial system. And so to accomplish our goal of being a shining light in the judiciary and in the country as far as these types of agencies, we really need more resources and staff to be able to conduct these investigations appropriately, and, you know, to help educate the judiciary. And when false allegations are made against judges, which we have a lot of, we can adequately and quickly investigate and clear these judges' names of false accusations. So that's my probably 30-minute spiel in less than 30 minutes. If you all have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer anything that you have.
I've only got one question, but I'd like to ask the committee members first if any of them have any questions.
I do, Chairman Hitchens. This is Scott Holcomb.
Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Boring, I certainly understand and appreciate where you're coming from. As a practicing lawyer, part of what you say gives me a lot of unease that we're seeing so many complaints, but I also know that not all complaints are created equal. And you mentioned that some of them are false allegations. Can you just give us a little bit of a sense of, to the extent that you can, of the types of complaints that you're dealing with? And more than that, seeing that the numbers seem to be pretty static in terms of a pretty high volume of 500, are there any interventions that we can use to try to reduce the number of complaints? Like, by way of example, are there training issues? I mean, I get sexual harassment, every judge should know not to do that, but are there other things that we might be able to take some actions to reduce this overall volume?
Absolutely. Taking your first part of that, the different types of complaints that we get, you know, we get a number of them. I would say 2/3 at least are preliminarily, after we have to review, look at it, see if we even have jurisdiction, or screened out with an initial investigation. It may be a domestic case where one of the parties was mad that they did not get custody of their children, and they file a complaint against the judge. And 9 times out of 10, there's nothing improper that the judge did in that. We have allegations from inmates that about conduct of the judges. Those are a lot of the ones that are screened out, or that we do in a preliminary investigation and realize that while the person may be unhappy with how their case went, there is no ethical violation. The numbers that we do get that are violations are, you talk about temperament, you talk about punctuality, but more importantly, it's other things that go far afield of what the judge's duty is. As far as training, that's one thing. I know I've spoken with Justice Boggs. He and I presented before. We actually spoke yesterday about presentations, not only about the judges, but staff and how that responsibility may fall back on the judge to supervise them. So I've really wanted to take a goal in stepping up our training program, giving judges the ability and the tools to know the guardrails they have to stay within. So I think that maybe could decrease the numbers a little bit, but I also think that with the numbers that we have, it's just, I think we have a new process of being able to, people can file complaints online with our agency. And I think maybe the public nature of what we do, not necessarily on the front end, but on the back end, I do think it gives people more confidence the way we're operating now, that we are going to try to move in the right direction on these things for good or ill with our investigations. I don't know if that answered your question, but I did as best as I could.
It does. And if I could have just a quick follow-up, I listened very carefully to what you said. It does sound like a lot of them in the family context and also from the prisoner context don't seem to have much merit and are quickly disposed of. Can you give us a sense of quantifying those that you would classify more as concerning, or at least you have to dig a little bit deeper, or that there's clear misconduct?
Right. Yeah. As far as the initial complaints, the screening of them, because we know that these are very serious issues, it does take a lot of time to even simply screen them, because a lot of these are not attorneys filing the complaints. You have to, kind of weed through to figure out what the actual complaint is, reading transcripts, that type of thing, to make sure we don't have jurisdiction and to make sure we're clear on it. I think that probably, I would say 2/3 of the complaints that we get are going to be, after, digging into it initially, will be dismissed. Once we get from there to preliminary investigation, I think probably at least 20%. We probably have well over 100 over the year that go into at least a preliminary investigation status, where we are going forward than just what we have in the complaint. We're having to, pull court records. We're having to go interview witnesses. We're having to do that type of thing. When it gets to the full investigation stage, that is when it's very serious. It's on the cusp of grand jury, basically. When we get to that stage, that is all hands on deck, and it basically becomes a large public corruption investigation. Me being a prosecutor 19 years, that's the best way I can equate it to. And over the past, we probably have had 20 cases in the past year I've had here, at least, that have gone into full investigation.
Okay, yeah, and that's not small. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, we're getting way behind. I got a question for you, Ms. Bourne, but I'll call you online and talk to you. It's just about the
Yes, sir.
historical perspective and using outside counsel. But I'll give you a call.
All right. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Justice Milton, Chief Justice Milton.
Yes, sir. How are you, Mr. Colonel Chairman?
It's always good to see you. I never thought we'd be dealing with each other from this perspective, but after many years of working together, I certainly appreciate you. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, sir. It's an honor to engage with you in any capacity, in whatever form we have, and it's a pleasure to be in front of this committee. I thank you all for your assistance and support over the years, especially during this more pressing time. We just appreciate your sensitivity during the budget cuts that we endured last year. We tried to cooperate and be full participants in the cuts that you were requesting. And you heard us when we talked about the need to strike the right balance. So I want to thank you. I'll just give you a big picture for where our court is right now. As you know, we do have the 2-term rule which means that we have to get our cases disposed of within 2 terms of court. Otherwise, they stand automatically affirmed. That means we don't run backlogs even in times of COVID. So we do not have a backlog. And while backlogs exist throughout some of the classes of court, especially with regard to jury trials, those backlogs do not exist in our court. Overall, our caseloads are down probably 14% from last year. In the previous year, we were trending upwards. That's largely due to the trial courts case logs not moving as fast. And so in the coming years, once those start hitting, they will come to us in rapid fashion, and we will have to make sure we dispose of those cases likewise within the two-term court rule. I'll go to I'll also say, I'm proud of our judges on our court in particular. You know, the work we do in terms of managing cases, we try to emphasize as much as we can the work we do on the administrative side. We are engaged with every board and commission, every class of court that makes up the bar. And in times of COVID, the level of engagement has increased exponentially. And just by way of example, with the Judicial Council itself, we typically have 4 meetings per year. In this year, we had 30. And so everybody's doing more to try to do the business of the court in a more efficient way and to find new ways to do things. And that's taken a lot of effort. And our judges have been front and center in that. We have 6 requests plus 1 that I want to go through with you today for the big budget, beginning with item 10.1. 10.1.1 is an increase in rental expenses with GBA. That is a pass-through item. That's not an item that we have anything to do. Well, we don't have a say in what that amount is. That amount is $516,253. Some of that amount that we are requesting was to be expected when we moved into the building in December of 2019. That left us 7 months of that existing fiscal year that was funded. So we expected the remaining 5 to be requested in this budget. So of that, 118,751 was expected. And then we had a GBA rent increase in addition to that of 397,502 for a total of 516,253. So that makes up the amounts for that request. The second amount that we're requesting is 26,654 for building maintenance and repairs. This is also fairly in line with the cut that we had, where we found savings in this category. But these amounts will help us with our moves and the installation of safety shields and card readers and things along those lines, more physical upgrades and improvements to the facility. And so that's the amount that's reflected there. The request for item 3 is for $97,500 for information technology. The IT department is where we took probably our largest cuts in the effort to make budget as requested. But these amounts are really necessary to keep our IT up and running and moving forward as we move into the next several years down the road. So we would like to purchase 2 server nodes. We have 6 and want to just keep those on a current basis. So we purchased 2, and those are $45,000 each. So that would total $90,000. And then just regular IT equipment maintenance and repair, an amount of $7,500. That makes up the total of $97,500. So that's the first item in the IT department. The second item in the IT department was not in our original budget request, but we added this later on, and that is to request an additional personnel, IT person. In the amount there is $95,698. The base salary for that position is $59,158. And here's the idea. Our IT folks are great. We've got 3 and they're off the charts good. And we've got them spread out pretty good. We have these 3 individuals serving our court entirely. Plus they also serve the Office of Bar Examiners. You may recall that the Office of Bar Examiners, when they conducted the bar exam this year, did so online, 100% online for the first time ever. Our IT folks are the ones that facilitate that. And they already facilitate the regular bar exam, which is pretty complex, where you dumb down your laptop and put on a special special software to prevent cheating and manage that process for a regular bar exam. But when you do it 100% virtual, that's pretty demanding, and they did that. So they serve our court and all its employees. We have 75 full-time employees plus 15 interns. They did the work with the Office of Bar Admissions, and you may know that they've also done the work with the business court. And in doing that, they set them up for virtual. They've done all their desktop work. And when they have been conducting hearings, our IT guys sitting right there, making sure nothing goes wrong. And then they also do the work for the report of decisions. And so we've got our 3 spread out pretty far, and they're doing good work and going deep in every aspect of what we've asked them to do. That would take us from 3 to 4. By way of comparison, the Court of Appeals has 4, I believe, and they're looking for 5. So we are asking for that amount to be favorably considered. And then item 4, 1.4 is an increase in funds for the National Center for State Courts. That's another formula funding request that's based on population. The National Center for State Courts provides assistance, research, guidance, project assistance in efforts to support courts across the state. This supports all classes of court, and it supports our administrative office of the courts. It has to be housed somewhere, and so a decision was made a few years back to house this budget item with our court, but it serves every class of court and all aspects of the court across the state. The amount that we're requesting represents an 11% discount in an effort to save funds and to make budget cuts. They agreed to take whatever amount is that matches the cuts that we've endured elsewhere. So this amount represents an 11% cut based on the cuts that we had received elsewhere. But we ask for your favorable consideration of that. And then the last item is an increase. No, it's the last 2 items, I'm sorry. Item 1.5 is an increase in funds for supplies. That amount is $67,428. And then the last amount is for personnel services that were frozen in amount of $50,776. That represents savings that we were able to enjoy in our last budget cycle when Justice Blackwell left, and some freezes that, well, not freezes, but some savings we enjoyed based on the time it took to hire his staff, and also to have the appointment for Justice Blackwell's replacement. However, now Justice Blackwell has been replaced with Justice LaGrua. She's hired her full staff. And so the amount of $50,776 will need to be restored in order for us to pay those people appropriately. Those represent our requests, Mr. Chairman, and I'll stop there and answer any questions you and the committee might have.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions? As usual, you must have done a great job. I don't even have any questions for you. It's great to see you, great to talk to you again. And if you have any questions, give me a call.
Always be good to be with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Court of Appeals and Justice McFadden.
Good morning, Mr. Grimm, members of the committee. I'd like to express on behalf of my colleagues our gratitude to you for providing us the resources we need to discharge our important responsibilities, which entail upholding the rule of law in our error correcting function and maintaining the clarity and consistency of the law in our precedent setting function. As an intermediate appellate court, we've been able to remain fully functional during the pandemic. Our work lends itself to remote operations. And like the Supreme Court, we have experienced a fall off of about 14%. We anticipate a corresponding increase when the floodgates in the lower courts loose. And like the Supreme Court, we have done our best to be helpful with respect to the budget constraints of this period of time. Some of what we've done, we could only do once, and we'll get into that a little more detail in a moment. But we do have some ability to work ahead, and we look forward to discharging our responsibilities as things return more closely to normal. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our budget chair, presiding judge, Sarah Doyle.
Good morning, everyone. First, Chairman Hitchens, I want to start by thanking you and the committee for the funds you restored in the supplemental budget and for the additional money for those employees making less than $80,000. We certainly appreciate all of your efforts and the hard work. For fiscal year 2022, we ask that you restore the funds that you cut out of our budget last year, which is two items, $216,000, I think it's $216,000 approximately, which is the equivalent of 6 furlough days for staff making more than $100,000. $254,715 in operating expenses was also cut. And those two are not specific line items on our on the tracking sheet, which I will get to shortly, but it's really important that we get that money back if it is available. The operating expenses is one that was cut, which impacted our IT expenses, our research Westlaw expenses, our bar dues, a lot of items that we shaved off. And this is becoming particularly important as there is a backlog down below. One of the items in our budget is $150,000 that the state essentially requires the Court of Appeals to generate on our own. And that money comes generally from copy cost. There's no guarantee that we make any copy cost, but we usually make some. And so the state requires us to try to bring up 150 of that. We have started to see, because of the sort of things not coming up, a sharp decline in those copy costs, which as that money dissipates and we are unable to make up that, will further cut into our operating expenses. In addition to those, we ask that you continue to fund 6 months of an additional judge's estimated salary and per diem to replace the judge who is on paid suspension. We are hopeful that this matter would be resolved by the end of 2021. And to the extent it got resolved sooner than that, we could always come back in the supplemental when we file those reports and make any corrections to any amount that you might have given. For example, if it ends in October, then we can always reduce that off at that point in time. But we're asking for the 6 months from July 1st through December 31st for that. And that amount is equal to $117,000. For the committee members and the chair, we did send over to Mr. Groom a kind of priority list that incorporates not only the tracking sheet amount numbers, but these additional figures. So moving to the tracking sheet, 5.1.1 and 5.1.2 are both reductions. Those were for amounts of cybersecurity insurance and a cybersecurity operations center that you funded last year. The 5.1.3 and 5.1.4 are the actual new numbers, and you will see that they are less than that. So we are asking for $43,000 for cybersecurity insurance and $40,506 for the operations center, and then reducing those other amounts because these are now the accurate figures. 5.1.5 is an increase for hardware and software cost of $180,000. I will tell you that that number, if you were to give us back the 254 in operating expenses, would subsume that 180. So technically, when we are talking about getting that 250 back, it would just be another 70 in addition to this 180 in line item 5.1.5. The next number, 5.1.6, is annualized rent expenses of $97,500. This is the simple pass-through, which is the actual numbers we are dealing with now that we've been in the building and have figured out exactly what our space allocations are. 5.1.7 is one-time funds to continue development of the case management system of $97,500. This is becoming more and more important as we are working virtually for online voting, online, just continuing to be able to do that. We don't online vote for opinions currently. We'd like to be able to get there for motions and that kind of thing as we continue to work outside the courthouse as well. On our sheets that we sent over to Mr. Groom, we also had some COVID-related requests. We submitted those to you in the supplemental, and the total expenses that we incurred this year was approximately $51,000 to get up to speed for Zoom hearings. We have, like the Supreme Court, held all of our oral arguments via Zoom since, I guess, April of last year. And we are continuing to do so. Our employees are working virtually as well, so that we don't have everyone in our offices at the same time. And all of this required additional IT software, hardware expenses. So we've incurred those, and but there are some ongoing costs, and that is approximately $10,946. Which continues with 19 Zoom accounts, which allows each judge to have an account more than the 40 minutes, patch management software, maintenance, those kind of things are just ongoing with any kind of IT purchases. And we think that not only is this going to be something we're going to continue to do and utilize during the pandemic, but be able to consider being able to use Zoom oral arguments and meetings as we move into the future, because we are a court that serves the entire state. We have lawyers who have been Zooming in from all over, and I know that they have really liked, I think, so to the extent, especially those who are several hours, maybe 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours from the court, not having to drive all the way up here for a 15-minute oral argument. And so those things and the ability of our court are going to be ongoing things that we do even when the pandemic is subsiding. So those are our requests. I am happy to answer any questions about any of the specifics.
Thank you very much. Do we have any committee members with any questions? Well, we don't seem to have any, so we thank both of you very much for getting us back on schedule.
Great. Thank you very much. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for your work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for my over-reliance on the name tag under your picture.
Oh, no problem. No. Business court.
I'm here, Mr. Chairman.
Judge Davis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking you, as Judge Roll did, for your support in our mid-year budget. We are grateful over here at the business court for that. Our cuts, or our proposals here, fall into really 7 categories, which I'll go through very quickly. They serve to restore the cuts from the FY21 budget, in addition to really startup costs, contractual costs that were missed or didn't come to fruition until FY22. I covered sort of the background of the court in the on the mid-year budget, so I won't boil the ocean here with it. But I started my term in January of last year with a mid-year budget that anticipated we would get up and running on August 1st of last year. So really 7 months, which we did. That budget was roughly just short of $1 million. We returned 120,000 of that back to the state unspent in July of last year. So we also, and that turns to the salary piece and relates to the salary piece, which is we'll start with section 5.2.4. And this is myself and my staff. Because we started in August, we were able to accomplish 70,000, almost 71,000 in cuts through effectively front-end furloughs by delaying the start of employees for anywhere between a couple of weeks to a couple of months to accomplish those cuts. And the request here is to restore the salaries to the full year budget that were accomplished through those front end furloughs. There's a second part that falls under 5.23 that is specific to the clerk of court, and that's roughly $20,000 or $19,949. Our clerk of court, and she's on here today with me, Angie Davis. She her salary by statute is pegged to the Court of Appeals clerk of court salary, and so we under budgeted for that when we started up, and we fixed this in the mid-year budget, and I'm asking for a similar fix here today. The next category of request really is, I'll go through them very, very quickly. 5.25, we did not fully budget for mail delivery. As you all know, I'm sure the courts over here contract with GTA to facilitate that, and I'm asking for $3,200 so that we can have our mail delivered. The next category is e-filing and case management agreements. That's under section 5.21. We were able to negotiate a front-end discount with our providers for FY21, and this increase of $23,000 reflects the go-forward cost with those two providers under our contract. Similarly, as you heard from the chief, we are supported on the IT side through the great work of the Supreme Court's IT team, and all other back office support is accomplished through a services agreement with the AOC in the amount of $32,000, and that's section 5.2.1. We prorated what we expected the amount to be for the FY21, and this reflects the agreement to get all HR, fiscal, budget, legal, that sort of thing. So the business court, unlike most entities, has no back office function of any kind. It's all contracted out, and so that amount is reflects the value of those contracts. The next category is IT maintenance cost, is 5.21 as well. They aggregated all the contracts into 5.21. And that's 4,986. And that is reflective of a cost that we cut last in the FY21 budget. We have a very thin maintenance, IT maintenance cost, and in consultation with the IT team are asking for $4,986 to be restored to that budget. And then finally, as you heard from the chief, similar on the rental expense line item, that is 5.2.2. It's 124,600. Because we started on somewhat of a rolling basis, the construction over here on the business court started with the chambers and the clerk's office. So we started paying for that in July of last year, and as that was captured in the FY21 budget, the courtroom was finished in December, and we started paying for that in January, and that too is caught up in the mid-year budget. This expense reflects our rent on a go-forward basis to GBA. And Mr. Chairman, that is my report.
Well, we appreciate all you've done this year. I know it's tough to begin from scratch and bring it into play, but I think you've done a great job. And just let me check back. Didn't you ask for the funds, the annualized cost for the clerk and the judgeship and supplemental?
For the clerk, yes, sir. For the other step,
okay, I understand. We're just moving forward with it since it wasn't there last year to keep it going.
yes, sir. And we are seeking we're gonna have to fix that statutorily at some point to because as Ms. Davis is, her salary will necessarily fluctuate depending on the seniority of the clerk of the Court of Appeals, and so we want to try to bring some predictability to what she will compensate, and so we have to fix that by statute.
Okay, well, we certainly appreciate it, and I apologize, everybody. I didn't realize you couldn't hear me. I've been told I need to take off my mask, and I'm old enough. I've had both my vaccinations, and I've only got one person in the room with me, so maybe I'm pretty safe. But I'm always told I speak too loud, particularly my wife. So I thought I was coming through clear. But I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Any questions from the committee?
Great. Okay. Thank you for hearing from me today.
Next up, Superior Courts.
Thank you, Chair Hitchens. This is Brian Amaro. I'm the president of the Council of Superior Court Judges. And first of all, I read your biography, and I want to say that how impressed I am, and I want to thank you for your decades of exemplary public service. Judge Padgett will be making our presentation. He's our budget chair.
My wife always says I look better on paper than I really am.
Colonel Hitchens, this is Wade Padgett, and it's nice to be able to put a face with a name. We want to tell you, first off, thank you for understanding why we needed to make a slight adjustment to the amended year budget as you graciously passed for us when we went to the Senate. And I think all that went well, and thank you again for your cooperation on that point. I've made a presentation on this as on a larger basis earlier, I guess a couple weeks ago, but I do want to go through the tracking sheet and the things that we are asking for adjustments. Just as a reminder, the Superior Courts have three sort of sub-programs within the larger Superior Court budget. One of those is for the Council of Superior Court Judges staff. One is for the Superior Court Judges program themselves, and the other is for what we call District Court Administrators, or DCAs. On the budget, it's referred to as Judicial Administrative Districts program. When we went through last year, the pandemic caused everybody to take a haircut of sorts, and one of the places where our organization felt it the worst or the deepest was the Judicial Administrative Districts program. We basically, the cuts resulted in a 70% reduction in their operating budget. And because of that, we had people who had to do their job without being reimbursed for their mileage, even though they drove hours and hours from one end of their district to the other. And we recognize that asking for a full restoration in a single one-year leap might be a bridge too far. So overall, their program was cut 11.22%. On 9.2.1, that number represents half of that restoration. So it's not even a full restoration of where they were before. But that would allow them to at least be able to cover their expenses. And what they do for us is in some places as fundamental as pens and paper, and in other places they help courthouse construction projects and things of that nature, IT. So they're very instrumental in what we do. Moving now to 9.3. A couple of these are pass-through expenses. For example, there are two savings on 9.3.1 and 9.3.2 that were the cost of creating new judgeships in 2 of our circuits. That's already happened. That's done. We don't need that money again. 9.3.3 is really a pass through from the retirement plan. It's not anything that we have much of a say in. 9.3.4 is where when we went through the budget last year, in order to make those numbers, the ability of judges to use senior retired experienced judges, we lost $1.875 million from the amount of money that we had to use senior judges to help us do our work. As you know, we are expecting an avalanche of work, and I heard the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court talk about it. It starts with us. And so that's coming, and being able to use senior judges would help us do 2 things at once. Instead of them working for us, they would be allowed to work alongside us. And in some places, they would carry the day-to-day business while we handle the jury trials. In some places, they would handle the jury trials while we do the day-to-day business, or perhaps both at the same time, depending on if you have enough courthouse space. So this number is not a full restoration. This allows us to have 5 senior judge days per active judge, up from the 0.75 that we ended up last year, but down from the number we had before. 9.3.5 allows us to have a less robust version of Westlaw. I know I heard Judge Doyle talk about Westlaw for the Court of Appeals. We normally have a very nice version of Westlaw that allows us to do more. This is a functional version, and it is half price, or not half price, probably 2/3 price. 9.3.6 is a restoration of the furlough days for the judges. We took that as across the board, and were able to accommodate that during the year. You were kind enough to restore about half of that at the small budget or the amended budget. We would ask that it be fully restored. And then the last, I guess, 3 items are all also sort of an automatic. 9.3.7, 0.8, and 0.9 are the funding, I guess, of the 3 judgeships that have been created and were put on hold because of the pandemic. And those would be sort of one-time costs to help set those up. Colonel Hitchens, I understand that at one point in time today, you may have asked some questions about SB 9, Senate Bill 9, and the Augusta Circuit, the Columbia Circuit being created out of the Augusta Circuit. Did you have any other questions about that? Because right now I'm sitting in Columbia County, so I'm probably really familiar with whatever is happening there.
Well, you may have heard me ask the question. I just saw that on the Indigent Defense Council that they wanted funding, and I had heard some rumors to the effect that this may or may not occur, but I wondered how much it would cost for a new circuit entirely.
Well, in this particular circumstance, it's going to be unique because you don't have to create any judgeships.
Since the judges have to live in their circuit, how that would work if it pans out that you have it exactly right, that the right number live in Richmond County and the right number live in Columbia County, and I guess it's the same way with the DAs.
Yes, sir. So the DA and the judges must live in the county in which they serve. Right now, based upon some retirements and different things, 3 of our judges live in Columbia County, and in doing the analysis with the JWAC committee, the people who do that number, they said that was the ideal number. That would leave Augusta, which would be Richmond and Burke, with 5. Now, I think they will eventually, very quickly, frankly, get to the point where they might need another, but that they would be on the list along with the other judges, the other circuits like we're here. The thing that would be the cost that you talked about, I think there's going to be some county cost savings, believe it or not, because of the way they've been dividing the overall circuit budget. But to the state, you're going to you have the DA piece and the PD piece. Even if you don't create a judgeship, you'll have those 2 expenses. And so I think that in both of their proposed budgets, there is money earmarked, or whatever the right word is, for funding or for staffing of this new circuit. Some of the ADAs from the Augusta circuit, I think 3 to 5, they differ, will go with those positions, or at least funding for those positions would go to the Columbia circuit, but then Columbia would need some more. And that would all be a part of the state funding that is, I think, in their budget. I don't have their line items and all, but I think it's in their budget request.
And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I've heard that Burke County might like to opt into the Geechee circuit too. And that would leave Augusta, I guess, by itself. And I don't know that there are rumors. I've heard it from some of our judges. I live in the Geechee circuit.
Yes, sir. I was familiar. You might have been keenly aware of that. Yes, sir. I was going to point that out.
So.
No, to be honest with you, I think Burke has asked for a study because they actually border, they're in the Augusta circuit. They border the middle circuit and they border the Ogeechee circuit. And I think they've asked for a study, but I don't know that anything has happened with that. And I'm not sure it's going to anytime in the immediate future.
Judge Gunner, you have a question?
Yes, well, just more of a comment. I was in the judiciary meeting over Senate Bill 9 that created the new circuit. And Chairman Fleming, I think, made the statement that he had a commitment to get the funding for that if it passes. And also the county commissioners that were there that all testified that they supported it and would fully fund it too with supplements and that kind of thing. So I think we're good as far as funding for Columbia County.
Yes, sir. There has been unanimous support in Columbia, Richmond, and Burke County for the split. So
I know there's one judge that lives in Burke County. Is that the only one?
yes, sir. He's the first judge. Well, you're not going to believe this, but I wrote a history book about the circuit one time, so I kind of know all this. He is only the second judge ever who is hailed from Burke County at the time of his appointment. A couple of them were born there and moved to Augusta, but he is from there, and he has not been sworn in just yet. That's former Senator Jesse Stone.
I knew who it was. I worked with Jesse when he was up here.
Yes, sir. I knew you did.
Do we have any additional questions for Judge Padgett? Okay, well, we thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, and good to see Judge Gunner again. Thank you very much.
Moving right along, we go to juvenile courts. Are they here? We've gotten ahead of schedule.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Hi, I'm Kirsten Wallace. I'm the budget director here with the Council of Juvenile Court Judges. Our budget request is actually kind of small, so I was going to offer two of our juvenile court judges to speak a little bit about the pandemic and the juvenile courts. First, we have President Judge Lisa Jones from the Southwestern Judicial Circuit. She's the president of the Council of Juvenile Court Judges.
Morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Jones. I am the juvenile court judge for the Southwestern Circuit, and our area extends from just south of Fort Valley down to Albany, almost over to I-75, and then almost over to Columbus. So we have about a 60-mile radius, and we work out of Sumter County in Americus, and always have. Also, Judge Price is here, who is the president-elect. He's from Floyd County, and I've been the juvenile court judge here for 20 years, starting in 2001, after the legislature created our positions, thankfully, back in 2000. And we've come a long way down in our circuit, and I think across the state also, but we've still got a long way to go. I believe our children and families are in a much better position than they were 20 years ago. Prior to that, I was an assistant DA and did much of the same type work. But as far as COVID is concerned, I believe overall we are in good shape as a court. Thankfully, we already had a rule in place that allowed us to have our hearings by video conference. So for many of us, many of our circuits, including mine, the issue was really just getting the equipment in place and getting everyone, all the players involved, all the lawyers and agencies, the ability and the training to be able to handle our hearings that way. So I feel like, for the most part, we are on top of our caseload, and we just worked right through it. So it has not been easy, though. I don't want to downplay it by any means. But what cripples us is just the lack of resources that they have. I know that I run on a shoestring budget. I don't have a secretary. I don't have a law clerk. And I'm very thankful for our staff at the Council of Juvenile Court Judges. I know I call on Eric and Kirsten and all the time to help me with things that I really don't have anyone else to help me with. Tuesday I was in court all day, mostly by Zoom, until about 7 o'clock that evening, and spent another hour in the office printing out exhibits and reorganizing the files and things like that, simply because there was no one else to do it. So in a nutshell, what that all means is that we really appreciate anything that you can do for us. We are working hard. We are on top of it. I think our families, they're lucky that we do have the systems in place that we do. This is not the type of job that you do for money or for any kind of prestige. I think most of us do it just because we have a calling to do it and believe that it is the right thing to do. So we are always happy to answer any questions you may have or help in any way that we can. Thank you for allowing us to be here.
Sure. Judge Price?
Well, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's very rare on Fridays that I get to actually sit in my office and Zoom with people other than litigants. Let me tell you, this last year's been trying, as you all well know, and I mean that in multiple interpretations of the word trying, in the sense that it's difficult and exacerbating with COVID pandemic infecting and affecting all of our efforts. It's also trying in the sense that we try to utilize and fulfill our statutory and constitutional responsibilities. Juvenile court has some very specific and very limited timeframes. Obviously, when you're dealing with children, expediency is important. It's also trying to the extent that we are actually holding hearings, and it's trying to get that set up. From an economic standpoint, obviously we're using Zoom. I've conducted 1,100 Zoom trials since mid-March. Counties are bearing the cost for that. Actually, I'm bearing the cost from my court. I'm paying all of the Zoom fees. We have some economic issues up here in Floyd County, obviously. Sales tax is not going as well as it used to be. Nobody's going out and buying things. But we are operating, we are working, we are fulfilling all our responsibilities. My court does not have a backlog. Most of the courts that I've talked to in the juvenile system are pretty much on speed. We have one advantage over the Superior Court judges. Obviously, they're under the restrictions from the extended judicial emergency order of Chief Justice Melton. But we're operating, we're working well. We rely very heavily on our executive director and the staff at CJCJ. Obviously, we communicate pretty much daily over our listserv, which we call Sidebar. So we are effectively working as a team with our leadership, with Eric and Kirsten and everybody at CJCJ. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We just hope that this gives you an idea of how we're operating and what our needs are, and we would appreciate your looking at the budget and giving us good consideration. Thank you.
Any of the committee members have any questions or comments for the two judges?
Chairman Hitchens, I'd like to ask Judge Price. I asked a question earlier, and thank you for speaking today, Judge.
No problem.
I asked a question earlier. There's a measure in the House that would move the 17-year-olds back into juvenile court. I just wondered, what implication would you think that would have on the budget? It seems as though an increase in cases would have an implication. So.
Well, you're correct. This unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but this is not a new bill. Mandy Ballinger, as y'all well know, has dropped this bill. I think several times, and there is a big push. I know that Mary Margaret Oliver is a big push. I testified at the Juvenile Judiciary Committee, I believe it was last December and the year before that, about the effect. And quite candidly, there would be an effect. Number one, moving 17-year-olds into the juvenile sphere as far as delinquency prosecution, based on calculations from my circuit, would probably increase our caseload about 25%. We are running on our delinquency cases about 650 delinquency cases a year, so that would be a significant increase. The other impact, and there's still some confusion in the legislation right now, because there was a discussion as to whether or not traffic should be 17 and under in juvenile court, and there's some collateral statutes that might need to be made. But yes, it would be an economic issue. Quite candidly, I do know that our probate judges are not real happy if we move the traffic out from them, because they lose revenue. But I think we're capable of absorbing that. I understand the scientific basis for that. We've had many trainings about the effect that young people don't really get their stuff together, so to speak, until they're about 25 as far as impulse control and decisions. But I'm not opposed to it. My concern is it going to be properly funded? That's the most significant to me.
Thank you, Judge Price.
I think that about wraps it up. If we don't have any other questions, I'd just like to say that I'm old enough and been in this business, not in the legislature, but out in the field dealing with criminals and juveniles for about 50 years now. And I remember the days when we didn't have special resources for juveniles, and they didn't get any special treatment. And I don't know what we would do in this day and time with the change in our society and culture if we didn't have it. And it's much like the accountability course to me. I've been intrigued by some of the successes, and I've gone to some of the graduations. And I think you do a great job, and you probably save a lot of children that become productive adults because of you. And I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to go over the budget request real quick, if that's okay.
Okay, well, my analyst here was just telling me that. I listed everything you had to say, but go ahead.
I apologize. I also want to mention that our executive director is also on the call, Eric John, and we also have another juvenile court judge on the call as well, Judge Renderhurd from the Tifton Judicial Circuit, in case any other questions come up. Our budget request is actually is in section 7. The juvenile courts is separated into two different programs. We have the council, and then we have the grants to counties for the juvenile court judges' salaries. The first request that we have is 7.1.1. This is the third year we're requesting this funding. It's for our juvenile detention alternative initiative statewide coordinator position. This position is actually being currently funded by the Department of Juvenile Justice through an MOU. We're just requesting that. I'm sorry.
Isn't that federally funded through them, though?
I'm sorry.
Isn't that federally funded through them? Isn't that a federal?
There's always been conversations about that. We think it's federally funded. We had heard state. It's been toggled back and forth. As far as we know, I think it is federally funded. But we'll have to inquire. I think each year it might be different, but currently, yes, it's funded through the MOU with Department of Juvenile Justice. And the other two requests that we have are in the grants to counties. The first one is for additional funding it's pursuant to Code Section 151152. These funds are for the 2 judgeships that were created in 2020 for the Griffin Circuit and for the Gwinnett Circuit. This is based on a formula that the juvenile court judges receive additional funding based on the number of Superior Court judgeships within the circuits. This was also approved in the amended 21 budget that was just passed. And then the second request, 7.2.2, this is just a housekeeping. There was an increase for the judicial retirement system percentage. So this is just the amount that's needed for the increased percentage amount.
Okay, any further questions from the committee members? Again, I made my little speech a little early, but I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for your participation today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. He's next. How about Commissioner Black? Is Commissioner Black on? Yeah, well, we were going to go off the schedule for just a minute for something special, but how about Mark Murrah? Anybody from Department of Agriculture on board?
Hi, Mr. Chairman. This is Mark Murray with Georgia Department of Agriculture.
Okay, you know, I spoke at length the other day with the commissioner, and he wanted an opportunity to say a few words here.
Yes, sir, and he is on standby. I know he's monitoring this right now, so he should be on in just a second. He wants to speak a little bit about a special prosecutor position, and he has his notes down. And I know he's on standby, kind of waiting for this. If there's any way we can just hold off just a second with him. I'll give him a text right now. He was expecting it a little later, I think.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to prosecuting attorneys. I see Mr. Skandalakis is on board, and he's familiar with your ask too. So I'm sure he has some other asks of his own. But so, Mr. Skandalakis with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, we'll come back to you because I'm sure Mr. Skandalakis wants to hear what you have to say too, since it involves him.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity. I've got on the line with me and representing the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, Chris Jones, who is our Chief Financial Officer, Bert Poston, who is our Budget Chair. Bert is the District Attorney for the Conasauga Circuit, and we were expecting Tim Vaughn to join us as well. Tim is our Chairman of our council, and Tim is Oconee Judicial Circuit DA, and there's Mr. Vaughn right there. So I will stick on to talk about the animal resource prosecutor, but right now what I'd like to do is turn it over to Bert Poston to talk about the DA program of the budget, and he'll go first.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to y'all this morning. I want to go down the track sheet in order of the items on there, but I did want to point out that our budget priority has been for a number of years our assistant DA pay. That's item 8.2.4, and so I'll be spending most of my time on that item, but I will go down them in order to make it a little bit easier for everyone. Also, I wanted to mention one item that's not on the track sheet. Superior Court's mentioned earlier the new judgeships in the Cobb, Flint, and Ogeechee circuits. Those come with an additional assistant DA for each one of those circuits, but that information wasn't available to us at the time we submitted our request, so it's not on the track sheet. But along with those new judgeships, we would require $193,482 to fund those 3 assistant DAs for half the year in FY22. That's January through June of the next fiscal year. So that just goes in hand with those judgeships. So I wanted to mention that.
I had it on my sheet. I'd written it in. I knew based on the judges you were going to ask for that. So.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to say that, and then I'll go through. I'll start with item 8.2.1. That is approximately $1.2 million for 12 juvenile court assistant DAs. And just kind of back up, several years ago, the juvenile code was rewritten from scratch. And as part of that rewrite, some of the processes and obligations of juvenile court staff got shifted to the district attorney's office in terms of reviewing cases and preparing petitions and things like that. So part of the negotiations into that, when that happened, there was an agreement to fund, at an initial measure, to fund 1 state-paid juvenile court ADA for each of the 49 judicial circuits. And then once we got to that level, then to go back and look at how many more might be needed, particularly for the larger circuits and the the geographically spread out circuits that might need more than one juvenile court ADA. So since that time, 37 of those positions have been funded. Most of those were funded in the FY 15 and 16 budgets. It's kind of slowed down since then, but there remain 12 circuits that do not have a state paid juvenile court ADA. And I think likewise on the public defender side, there are 9 circuits that don't have a state paid juvenile court public defender. So that's just the funding that would be necessary to finish that project off. If this body wanted to complete that this year, that's what it would take. The next 2 items are much smaller. 8.2.2 is to restore funding that was cut in the current fiscal year budget in anticipation of furlough days that would offset those cuts. Now, half of that amount has been restored to the current year budget. So that would be the full amount that we would ask to restore to the next year budget so that we don't have to start that year thinking about furlough days. And then 8.2.3 would restore some additional funding that was cut from the current budget. We are currently managing that cut by hiring delays. So if we have a position that comes vacant, typically a DA has to wait a couple of months now to fill that vacancy in order to save enough money to pay for the leave payout for that position before they can hire a new one. Obviously, the smaller circuits, that's more of a hardship than it would be in the larger circuits. But restoring that funding would allow us to do away with those hiring delays and allow DAs to immediately replace someone when there's a vacancy. So we'd ask that that funding be restored that was cut last year. Now that gets me then to the item that I want to spend the most time on, and that is 8.2.4. To really explain that and not just talk about this year's budget, but our long-term goals here. Our assistant DAs are paid on a career pay scale. When ADAs are promoted, they don't have ranks, sergeants and corporals and things like that, but they have a career ladder type pay scale that's established by statute, set up by the council. Just speaking personally, I started in the DA's office in 1992. I became a state paid assistant DA in 1996. And from 1996 to 2008, I had confidence in that I would move up that pay scale if I earned those promotions. If I did everything I was supposed to do, I could move up. I could afford to buy a house. I could afford to get married. I could afford to start a family. And everyone, assistant DAs at that time, if you wanted to be a career prosecutor, you could afford to do it and you could plan to do it because you knew where you're going to be on the pay scale. All that changed in 2008, of course, with the Great Recession. Since that time, of course, we had in FY09, we had a number of furlough days. That eventually stopped, but there was a few years where there were no movement on the pay scale. No one went up anywhere on the pay scale. In more recent years, we have gotten some funds to adjust the pay scale and to move people on the pay scale, but it's been kind of every year, just we might or we might not get that. And so it doesn't instill any confidence in those young ADAs that if they want to make a career of prosecution, they can stay and know what's going to happen to them. In particular, in the last 13 budget cycles, we have moved ADAs who have been there since 2008, have moved between 4 and 6 steps up the scale. And the scale itself has been adjusted in a percentage amount that would be equal to about 2 steps. So rather than 13 steps of movement during that time period, at most ADAs have moved 8 steps in 13 years. So we have a number of ADAs that are on the pay scale several steps below where they qualify to be based on their years of experiences and the training they've had and the work they do. They should be placed higher on the scale, but for the budget limits that don't allow us to do that. The problem that creates, first of all, is turnover. The younger ADAs that don't see a career path because they don't see that steady funding, they don't really know 5 years, 10 years down the road where they're going to be on the pay scale, end up leaving after about 5 years with us and going into private practice. Also, ADAs that were here, started around 2008 and maybe have 5 or 10 years. They give up at some point. I've seen that in my office. promising young ADAs that wanted to be career prosecutors but could not raise a family for what I was able to pay them, had to leave. And so we've got a lot of ADAs at the top of the pay scale that are nearing retirement. We're still able to hire ADAs at the bottom of the scale. Particularly in the last couple of years, we were able to increase the starting pay. But we've got this gap in the middle where we can't hold on to people. And that middle group would be tomorrow's leadership, tomorrow's senior ADAs, but we just don't have them because they're not sticking around. So that's the biggest problem of not being able to fund our pay scale, is that pay progression piece. We had 2 pay compensation studies in the last few years. As I mentioned, we've revised our pay scale. In particular, we've moved the starting pay a little higher. And so we have a good scale. We have compared to other states around us, we're happy with where our pay scale is, but we need that steady annual funding. It's not just about this year. It's about establishing an expectation that that's going to be funded every year and that we'll actually have career prosecutors in the state and not ADAs that come out of law school, work a few years, and then go on to other things. The other problems that get created is if you look at our approximately 400 state-paid ADAs, is you'll find numerous examples where 2 ADAs have very similar experience levels, but are very separated on the pay scale. They might be a few steps apart on the pay scale. Or you will see 2 ADAs with they're on the same spot on the pay scale, but one of them has 5 years more experience than the other. So you have some inequity there that is also a problem. So what the funding in 8.2.4 would allow us to do is 3 things. One is it would provide the step increase for the current fiscal year that was not funded for those ADAs that qualify. That's not every single ADA, but for those ADAs that qualify, they would get the step increase they missed this year, assuming they were employed with us before the start of the current fiscal year. They would also get a step increase on their higher anniversary date next year. And so that would keep anyone from falling even further behind on the pay scale to where they are already. And third, a small amount of that funding would go to those relatively small number of ADAs who were with us all the way back in 2008, who have stuck it out and who are 5 or 6 steps behind on the scale, to move them up a little bit, not all the way to where they ought to be, but at least move them up a little bit to reduce the level of inequity in the pay scale from ADA to ADA. That's what that funding would allow us to do, and it would set us up for starting in FY23 and in the future to have much smaller requests to just maintain that pay progression. Because it ultimately comes down to a decision is, do we or do we not want career prosecutors? And I think we all want that. Victims deserve it. In order to do the work we do, we want career prosecutors, but to have that, the progression on that pay scale has to be funded. So that's our major ask. That's our highest priority in the budget. And I appreciate you giving me the time to talk about that. I'd be glad to answer any questions about that item or any of the other items on the budget. If I can't answer it, then Pete or Chris or someone can.
Mr. Chairman, if I might add, I think the committee's heard a little bit about what we're expecting after we're able to resume jury trials and even get back to grand jury. PAC recently did a poll of the DAs, the 49 circuits, about 42 of them responded. And of the number of cases that are not on a calendar, that is, they haven't been indicted, they haven't been accused, and they're not on an actual trial calendar, but just the number of cases inside a DA's office, we're looking at over 50,000 cases that we are reviewing for possible potential charges to file either accusations or indictments. And Mr. Chairman, as you well know, having worked many years in public safety, just because you get a case on the trial calendar doesn't necessarily mean that case moves. So you're also talking about the cases prior to COVID, which are on trial calendars and have not been, have to be handled. So the need for experienced prosecutors who can negotiate cases and try cases is critical.
And I'm very familiar, and I worked at CJCC for about 4 years back in the late 90s, and I was just astonished. We got some federal grants, and I hired some ADA drug prosecutors with federal money, and I couldn't believe they graduated from college, gone to law school and passed the bar, and they started out at $35,000 a year. And I've been in court many times, and it makes a big difference whether you got a prosecutor that knows what he's doing and somebody that just graduated from law school and is practicing.
Absolutely.
I'm with you. I tell you what, probably the number one case we'll hear today for all these is recruitment and retention throughout state government. It's a real issue right now, and I could talk all day about it and some of the reasons, some of the things that ought to be done to correct it. But I've been talking about it for a long time and haven't been very successful. So
you've experienced it. You know exactly what. Yes.
But I'm sympathetic. I know the judge used to be a DA too. And I'm sure Judge Gunner, he understands and wants to advocate to fix it. So.
Chairman Hitchens, I want to weigh in as well because this is
Sure.
an important issue. Out of law school, I did some work with the DA down here, and after I found out what they were making, there was, even though I wanted to do the work, there was no way I could do it because of the amount that a starting out ADA is going to make. So I fully support trying to get this put in the budget. This is an important issue. We're having troubles down here, and I'm sure we're having it across the state. Retaining folks will get 5 years in, and then they see that they can make so much more in private practice that they leave. And even in the last 3 years, it's been like a revolving door down in one of the circuits in my district. So I appreciate you all bringing this, Pete and Bert, and it has my full support.
Thank you, sir.
Did you want to comment, Judge Gunner?
Yes, sir. If you don't mind, I did have a couple of questions. What is the base pay now? The starting step, what is that at?
The base pay is around $50,000. Is that correct, Chris?
The minimum is $50,000 coming in, and of course it's based on their placement with years of experience, and so normally we're seeing about 63.
Okay.
With
Right
10
out of
years,
law school is 50.
Right.
Right out of, and with 10 years experience, so right at 50, it's at 50 for a brand new ADA. If you stay with the DA's office 10 years, it's less than $71,000. So a 10-year prosecutor is $71,700, I believe. Is that correct, Chris?
Correct. 70,000.
Well, that's where they should be on the scale. We have some
That's-
prosecutors that aren't making that.
That's exactly right. That's what our scale says. But because of everything that's happened since 2008, we have some that aren't making that.
And are you finding that those coming out of law school have so much debt that they can't take the position even if they want it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, y'all aren't asking to do away with the step increase program that you have. Is that?
No, sir.
Okay. Just
Asking to fund it.
Yeah.
Be funded, right.
Okay. Well, I know from my experience as DA, it was very hard to find a quality attorney for the money that we had available. And where you fell on the steps was critical in being able to hire somebody. And I was constantly hiring people. I don't think I went a year without looking for at least 2 ADAs to fill a spot in my 12 years that I was there. So it was a constant turnover where I was at. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. I fully support your request for an increase.
And I don't make any promises, but we understand it and certainly would like to make it better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Kidlakis, you want to do the prosecuting attorney's counsel?
I will turn that over to our CFO, Chris Jones. Chris.
Thank you, Pete. Mr. Chairman, yes, I'll cover the Prosecuting Attorneys Council program. This is section 8.3. We had 4 requests for the council. Request 8.3.1, this is $35,000. This is an increase funds for regular operating to reflect a restoration for legal research and analysis. This is the Lexis Advance subscription. This was a one-time reduction negotiated in FY21. And as you know, it provides comprehensive access to legal research that really impacts all of the statutory and primary duties of both the prosecuting attorneys council as well as the district attorneys. The access is for, primary sources, federal and state statutes, regulations, most recent case law, as well as secondary sources. And this access, it can really only be, it's as comprehensive as it is, this can really only be provided through Lexis Advance subscription. Again, we provide this to all 49 circuits, and really without adequate access to Lexis Advance, their duties really are inhibited. For request line 8.3.2, this is an increased funds for regular operating to reflect a restoration for the prosecutor case management system. This is what we refer to as the tracker case management system. Again, it was a one-time reduction negotiated with the contract in FY21. We're asking for restoration of that. Tracker is a custom developed case management system used by the prosecuting community. As well, it also gives policymakers the ability to access data for various performance metrics. Some of the stats for Tracker to show the importance was deployed back in 2006. Currently, 4.4 million cases are housed in Tracker. We have 3,000 registered users, as well as currently we're seeing about 100,000 new documents per month loaded into Tracker. That's about 1.2 million per year. As it's grown, we have 7.7 million documents to date. As well, all 49 circuits, as well as 47 Solicitor General offices do use Tracker in some capacity. Moving to request line 8.33. This is $173,928. This is an increased funds for regular operating to reflect a restoration for training for prosecutors and investigators, which is certainly a primary source for prosecutor CLEs as well as law enforcement post hours. To give you some stats, so during COVID this past year, our number of trainings have actually remained consistent. However, the in-person trainings have been reduced by 75%. We were in 2019 doing 100 in-person trainings. This past year in 2020, we did 25. Now the change there was the web trainings. And then we have heard from others earlier. We went from 8 webinars or Zoom trainings in 2019 to 81 in 2020, which is a significant increase for the trainings. We have averaged over the last few years about 20,000 hours for CLEs as well, probably 13,000 post hours. Consistently, as I mentioned, we've been doing over 100 trainings per year, and the restoration really, it'll allow in-person trainings to continue where the attendees are able to get more CLEs at a given event than the individual webinars.
And of course, Mr. Chairman, that's part of our mission and our statutory obligation is to train state prosecutors and also help train law enforcement officers to get their, as you well know, their post-certified hours.
Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
And our final request was 8.3.4. This is an increase of funds for regular operating to reflect a restoration that was cut for furloughs. This represented 4.5 furloughs for staff with salaries greater than $50,000 from the FY21 budget. And so far, it's been 29 employees have been impacted by the furlough. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, we'll be glad to answer any questions.
I have one question. What would be the cost if we already asked this about the Superior Court judges, but for the Columbia County Circuit for the DAs, if they were?
Yes, sir. We have, Chris has worked on that budget. It's about 1.3 million. And I know that, and I think we've sent this to Andrew Zoll and also to Brian. Yeah. We've also sent that. And I know that Judge Paget believes that you can transfer 3 of the Augusta DAs, assistant DAs, to the new Columbia Circuit. As we read statute 15-1828, it contemplates that those assistant DAs who are working and have been assigned to the Augusta Judicial Circuit will remain in the Augusta Judicial Circuit. So when you do the Columbia Judicial Circuit, we're talking about a new DA, a new chief assistant DA, 1 investigator, 2 secretaries, and Chris, how many other assistant DAs does that formula?
4 additional ADAs, so that'd be a total of 5 assistant DAs.
Okay.
Okay, do anybody have any questions from the committee members?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I have, well, I have kind of a comment and a question. The tracker program, I was a DA when they started putting that together, and it's a very impressive, very important part of the job that they do. My question there is, did we copyright that when we developed that program? Now, I guess that's directed to Pete.
I'll have to direct that to Chris because I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm not aware that we've copyrighted tracker.
Yeah,
we can certainly find that out.
We'll find out and report back to the committee.
I remember when we were doing it that we had talked about doing that, and part of the reason for doing that is that we had thought maybe we could generate some funds by selling the program elsewhere around the country.
As you know, Representative Gunner, Tracker was developed in-house by PAC, and it's used now throughout the state. And there are some circuits that are so small, they could not afford to go to these canned programs like Odyssey and Tyler and Pioneer. So that's why it's been a great success. And it's just, we do it with how many people, Chris? How many people are on our Tracker contract?
3.
3. And we cover the entire state now.
Yeah, and I can attest to how fast we got dependent on that program in our DA's office. It was great. So I think that's one of the best things that I participated in while being a DA.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. I think you guys are doing a great job, and I appreciate it.
If there aren't any more questions, we'll move on to Commissioner Black.
Chairman Hitchens, my name is Avery. I work in Commissioner Black's office.
I'm here, Avery.
Phone call. Oh, he's right there. There we go.
Yeah, I'm here. Chairman, to all you and your committee members, I appreciate your friendship, which may be in grave jeopardy that you called me, and I wasn't ready. We had on our schedule 11:30, so my apologies to the committee. And
well, we were a little early and tried to get you in.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's a shoehorn, and it's a little weird. What in the world am I doing here with y'all's committee? And I appreciate PAC and Pete and his leadership over there. We've had some conversations about a project. I don't know how much room there is as y'all be considering the 22, but we have a very active companion animal advisory group. They're very passionate as we are. Y'all know we've got responsibility in that area with respect to licensing kennels and breeders and stores. And we all know that there's a big issue with animal abuse out there and cruelty. Sometimes that does involve companion animals, and it does have ties to gang activity. It does have ties to even some of the trafficking issues that I know the governor and first lady are very passionate about. But a special prosecutor idea has come up. Pete and I have talked. He has many priorities. We have many priorities. And I know the committee, many of you have an interest in this subject. We just wanted to raise it, though. I think it's about 125 grand that would, if we could ever have a statewide prosecutor for animal cruelty, I think it'd be a great assistance to rural counties, help address a very strong, initiative that I think all of us are passionate about. So Mr. Chairman, you and I have talked. I'm grateful that you let me have this opportunity to share with the committee. And if there is some room or some consideration, at least we wanted to get that out on the wish list. And I appreciate Pete and his team, and certainly if you let me have just a moment this morning.
Well, I've talked to Pete, and certainly I've talked to you. I'm an old farm boy. One thing that I can't stand is mistreatment of animals. And,
Yes, sir.
I've seen it. We see it in raids on houses, not only mistreatment of children, which is preeminent, but, mistreatment of animals. And we have a lot of people in our state that they're very interested in that. And when I was the chairman of Public Safety and Homeland Security, we had a lot of interest from people who wanted more prosecution, particularly with regard to dogs and cats.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Out in the field and horses and cows that you can count the darn ribs, and I mean dogs tied up outside when it's 120 degrees in South Georgia and no water, and it infuriates me.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might add, right now, out of the Talawega circuit, Jonathan Adams, the DA there, has a grant from the Holland Ware Foundation for an animal abuse prosecutor. And she goes across the state. We've been monitoring her cases. And any time that she is needed, all the way from North Georgia to far South Georgia, she's there. And you're right, and Commissioner Black is right. We see these animal cases, animal abuse cases, particularly tied to gang activity and also to human trafficking and all other illegal, pet supplies and things of that nature. I think they're called puppy mills. We see them from the puppy mills as well. So it is a need. We understand the budget considerations, and I don't know, I didn't hear Commissioner Black ask for this, but I would love to have a special animal prosecutor at PAC. And I understand about the budget. We estimate it costs about $130,000. That's bringing in an assistant DA with 10 years experience plus benefits, so about 130. If the committee finds need to do that, PAC can cover it. We can do the training. We can house it. We can't cover it financially, but we can house it. We can do the training. We can train prosecutors. Will be available to Commissioner Black and his team. So that's what I wanted to say.
We certainly appreciate it. I see some of our committee members have some questions. Chairman Powell. Chairman Powell?
See if I can figure out how to get this on. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I finally hit the right button.
Okay.
Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
I got just a single question to ask. There's a practice that's going on that I'm running into on certain segments of industry where some of our district attorneys are hiring or commissioning private attorneys to act as district attorneys. I call them privateers that are certainly subject to questionable types of behavior for the confiscation of properties and things like that. Can you address that to see where that's going, how common of a practice that is? Because some of us believe that in the role of enforcing the law and for confiscation and things like that, that should be solely the duty of the elected prosecutors and not hired prosecutors that are paid on a commission basis. Can you address that and see how widespread that is?
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you most of the DAs do the asset forfeiture cases in-house, and their staffs are handling it. There are some DAs that, because of the size of the case, they do retain special assistant district attorneys. Now, the statute is clear. They're not allowed to be paid on commission. They're supposed to be paid at the same hourly rate as an assistant DA, or I think the DA. I'll have to check on that statute. But I understand your concern, and I'm willing to work with you on that matter. I myself, when I was DA for 25 years in the Coweta circuit, if we couldn't handle it in-house, then I would find another way to do it, because I thought that was part of my duty. But some DAs will tell you they simply don't have the resources, they don't have the manpower, and they're tied up in court or other matters and must hire special assistant district attorneys to handle these cases.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. Appreciate you.
Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you. This is either to Commissioner Black or Director Skandalakis. Do you see the animal resource prosecutor as being more of a resource, or as an active prosecutor kind of traveling the state, prosecuting these sorts of cases? I guess I'll ask you first, Commissioner Black. How do you see this position kind of coming to fruition? More as a resource or as an active prosecutor?
No, I think the vision, Madam Chair, was a little more of a special, prosecutor that would be available to us, assist and actively prosecute across the state. That's a little more in Director Skandalakis's territory than it is mine. But the notion was to come alongside local DAs or actually take those cases when maybe they have. Everybody's got plenty to do, but to be able to focus on animal cruelty and have this specialty available across the state. Director, did I speak correctly on that?
Commissioner Black is correct. And Chairman Ballinger, I think you would see it kind of a combination. One is a resource prosecutor for DAs that have the ability and have the resources to provide them information on the how-tos. But sometimes you will have an animal case and you're seizing the animals, and what do you do with animals that have to be turned over? Who pays those costs? How does that work? And that animal resource prosecutor can help you with that. Other times you have DA's offices that don't have the resources to prosecute the case, and that resource prosecutor, and we do this through PAC all the time, we have resource prosecutors, they might sit first chair and they'll be the actual prosecutor in the case. So it's a combination thereof, depending upon resources and availability and what goes on.
Representative Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can y'all hear me okay?
Hear you very well.
All right. Thank you, Pete. Commissioner Black, thank you. I think this is an interesting issue. I believe wholeheartedly that if an individual will harm an animal, they have a great propensity to harm another human. So I would be interested in pursuing this. Pete, you mentioned that there was a circuit here in our state that had received a grant that was funding.
The grant is from the Holland Ware Foundation, and whether or not it continues for another year after this year is a question. And this grant was written by the prosecutor herself. She wrote her own grant, and we needed a place to house it. So we housed it in the Talawega circuit. And Jonathan Adams uses this prosecutor to prosecute cases for him, but he also has made her available, this particular prosecutor, to anyone across the state. So he has offered that to us, even though he doesn't have to. So we have joined forces, PAC has joined forces with DA Jonathan Adams, and we've used this animal resource prosecutor in a number of counties and on a number of different cases. In fact, some of you may be familiar with an operation that the U.S. Attorney for the Southern Circuit operated, in which they seized some, I believe it was dogs in a dog fighting ring. And it might not have been dogs, but anyway, he used this animal resource prosecutor as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one more. I wonder if the I would like to see if this grant would be available again, because we have seen some success here in the state. Also, if PAC and or the Department of Agriculture would be eligible or could write similar grants to organizations or associations that have monies to fund. I'm not saying that we shouldn't fund it. By no means am I saying that. What I'm saying is I think any available monies out there would go a long way to helping us here in the state with this.
We will certainly pursue that. And I have, in fact, I have I'm going to schedule a meeting with the director of the Holland Ware Foundation to find out where they are on this matter. But I think we will be pursuing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no further questions, I think we're going to take a break until 10:20.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it very much.
Sure. Are we on? Yep, we're ready to go. Good. Are we back on?
Yep.
How about Mr. Neal, J. Neal? I see you there. CJCC, you're on.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I hope you're doing well today.
So far, so good. I hope you don't ruin it for me.
I hope not as well. It's good to have switched roles with you over the course of these few years.
Well, you know, I worked at CJCC for almost 5 years.
I did not know that until recently, and I have some staff that reminded me that you worked here.
And I enjoyed it. It was a real change, and got a lot of interesting information out of it. I know you're going to talk about some of it today. I guess I've visited all the shelters in the state with the violence against women and children. And
well, I knew when I came to CJCC, I knew a lot about CJCC, I thought, and then I began to learn of all the different things CJCC is involved in, and realized that we're far more involved and far more complex than I realized.
Yeah, there's a lot there that people don't realize. Even some of the members on the board are shocked when they first come there, about all the things that they handle. And certainly it's a pass through for a lot of federal grants that are very important to our state.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're on.
Well, thank you very much. Let me just highlight a few changes in our budget. They're pretty simple. 30.5.1 says that we will maintain responsibility for managing and administering accountability court grants. 30.5.2, though, transfers the $30,006,227 for accountability courts program from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council program. And you will see in 30.6.1 that those funds are transferred into a program within CJCC for the Council of Accountability Court Judges. So that's just kind of truing up our accounting. The only financial impact that we see in this budget proposal is 30.7.1. That is increasing funds for grants to domestic violence shelters and sexual assault centers, $700,000 increase. And that $700,000 increase represents the $700,000 cut from last year's budget. So that's a reinstatement of last year's cuts. And those are the only recommended changes in our budget.
And I'll just say, I've been besieged by calls from people that some of them who I know from some of the shelters around. And my understanding is probably got a pretty substantial federal grant 4 or 5 years ago, and each year they've downgraded it to the point that I think it's like 2.7 million in the hole now.
So just to give you a backdrop on those decreases, in fiscal year 2018, our VOCA grant that we received was $99 million, 99.7. So basically $100 million. 2019, it was 68 million. 2020, it was 53 million. This year, we haven't received the exact number yet, but based on prior year calculations and knowing what the cap is that Congress set, we believe it's going to be $46,746,000 this year. So that is a tremendous reduction that we've seen over the last few years. I will say that our staff here at CJCC has done a phenomenal job managing the grant. We knew when we received $100 million 4 years ago, we knew that we were not going to receive that $100 million every year. So we have been historically taking these grants and doing 3-year cycles to spend those grants down. So when we award a grant, we typically award that grant for a 3-year cycle. With that $100 million grant, we also did a significant amount of one-time funding for our partners so that they could upgrade things that they needed around their facilities. It was a great opportunity for our partners with some one-time funding. We purchased a lot of vans. We did some things with their facilities that would not have otherwise been available, because we knew that we weren't going to be able to continue to receive that kind of money from the federal grant. we didn't anticipate dropping off as precipitously as it has, but thankfully we were prepared for it to reduce somewhat. We have been through that conservative approach. For example, in 2018, 19, and 20, we awarded $80 million to approximately 300 programs for those 3 years. This year, we decided to just continue again rather than doing competitive bids. Our original plan was to do competitive bids again this year, but due to the cut, we decided to do another continuation grant. Obviously, we can't do 80 million this year with the cuts the way they are. We are probably going to do, the council has not voted on what the cut's going to be, but as we're looking at it from a staff perspective, we believe that we're probably going to have to do cuts somewhere in the range of 10% this year. If that grant continues to be 44 million over the next couple of years, we're looking at doing 10% cuts again next year and the year after. So it's hard to know what the federal government's going to do. We do know that there's an effort by a lot of partners around the country to try to do some things legislatively in DC to fix this so that we can get some stability with our funding and have a better idea of what we can expect on a year-to-year basis. But we are in a position now to, after having awarded 80 million a year for the last 3 years, and only getting 50 some million last year and now 40 some million this year, we're going to have to begin making those cuts in the neighborhood of 10% with this upcoming grant.
Some of the directors tell me they may be on the verge of shutting down some of the shelters, and for anyone that's ever visited those and seen the women who live there in fear very often, and whose future is very predictable and not very optimistic. You know, it's a sore spot with me. I can't imagine people in our society living like that.
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you this: we've got a number of programs that are in areas of the state where they're able to raise a good bit of nonprofit funding because of corporate donations and other opportunities to raise funds to help support their programs, but specifically in rural areas of the state where the donor bases are small, it's difficult for those programs to raise additional funds. Those programs depend a great deal on the grant funds that come from CJCC, whether it's state funds through the Family Violence Program or whether it's through the federal grants that pass through to us. Many of those rural programs are very, very dependent on them.
Many of us appreciate what you do, Jay, you and your staff, and you do good work and utilize money to the maximum extent, and I appreciate it. Anybody? Yeah. I never know whether to call you judge or representative, Gunther. You know, sometimes everybody still calls me by something that's 20 years old, but Representative Gunther.
Thank you. I don't know if they'll ever quit calling me judge.
They won't.
Jay, I wanted to ask you, does the SANE program, the sexual assault nurses, does that fall under the VOCA grants?
So it's not entirely funded by VOCA, but obviously I don't think it is. Christy would be able to tell you exactly that, but I do know a considerable amount of it comes from VOCA. Yes. Okay.
And just a comment. I've had a lot of contact also from folks in these shelters calling, and the child advocacy centers. A lot of the prosecutors are dependent on those centers for getting the evidence for sexual assault on children. They have people that are specially trained to interview a child without putting words in their mouth that helps make the the case.
Right.
One of the things that these shelters are experiencing in this COVID situation is that they can't do fundraising, or they can't do effective fundraising. And that's what got everybody calling to see if there's any extra money that they can get since the VOCA program is being cut. So I just wanted to make that statement so everybody understood what was going on.
You're exactly right about that. As a matter of fact, I'm sending, I think we may have already sent to you, Mr. Chairman, I think we already sent some information to Courtney that will be distributed, to the committee. But let me just highlight real quick what the 10% cut would amount to. For our domestic violence and sexual assault centers, that would be about a $2.7 million decrease in this fiscal year. Based on our numbers from the Statistical Analysis Center, that would be the potential of 3,780 victims that may not be able to receive adequate services as a result of those cuts. Child advocacy centers, the cut would be about $1 million. Court-appointed special advocates, the cut would be about $670,000. The Prosecuting Attorneys Council with their victim advocates cut would be about $1.5 million. Those are the projected cuts based on a 10% reduction.
Any further questions for the director? Is that all you have, Jay?
Mr. Chairman, that's all we have. Obviously with us, we have Executive Director Taylor Jones and Chief Judge Goslin to present the Council of Accountability Court, Council of Accountability Court judges portion of our budget, and they are on the call as well.
Okay. We just have you listed on the tracking sheet in reverse order. Okay, let's hear the advocacy court judges.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Hitchens. I'm Kathy Goslin, and I'm the current chair of the Council of Accountability Court Judges. Taylor Jones is our director, and we appreciate CJCC giving us a little bit of their time to present our part of the budget. I did want to tell you that it is my honor to represent the council and the 169 courts that there are, accountability courts in the state of Georgia that receive funding from the state. We, of course, support the move of the $30 million from the line item 30.5.1 to 30.6.1, particularly because CJCC will continue to maintain their responsibility as far as managing and administering those grants. And they do such an excellent job. We really appreciate all they do. So that just puts the money in our budget. That is the money that is distributed to the courts across the state. There are 169. I can tell you during the pandemic, while there was a brief shutdown of accountability courts, probably long enough for people to understand how to do treatment virtually and how to do court virtually. And I know that almost all the courts have resumed either doing a hybrid model where they bring some participants in person and use a virtual court or Zoom or something like that for the rest of court, as well as with treatment. That is in large part due to the leadership of the council under Ms. Jones' leadership that gave people opportunities to figure out how to do this, suggestions, access to the technical knowledge that they needed to switch over. I think from listening this morning that you are familiar with accountability courts. And so, yeah, so that's wonderful. And I'm glad to answer any questions, as is Taylor. I do want to tell you that this last year we had 7 implementation courts that started that we were not able to fully fund. And there are 5 new ones that want to come on in fiscal year 22.
I think they do a great job, and I've seen the positive results, and they go beyond just inflicting punishment when they try and rehabilitate and take the time and effort. I've seen it in veterans courts and drug courts and particularly. They do a great job. I eat breakfast every Friday with a Superior Court judge that's involved in it, and he's a great advocate too, and he does a great job. But I wish we'd started them earlier.
I
think
know.
could have resolved a lot of problems. I will say I did get a first complaint about him the other day from a sheriff who I know very well, who said not to fund anymore, that he didn't have the deputies to man the courts, and he couldn't get any money to pay them for overtime. But I thought that was a little frivolity there. That certainly it's probably worth a little overtime to help people make them productive citizens.
And keep them out of the jail, which would be a problem for the sheriff as well. So
cost a whole lot more, and
yeah.
And the education they get there is very different than they get as a result of advocacy. So.
It is. I've been fortunate to be a mental health court judge for about 15 or 16 years now. So it's been a real pleasure for me, as well as a veterans court. And I know Judge Gunter is familiar with that as well, Representative Gunter. So he and I work together on that.
Well, my grandson's a psychiatrist, and we talk about it all the time. And, and certainly mental issues are throughout our criminal justice system. And I think
they are
estimated about probably 80 to 90% of our inmates in custody have some type of mental affliction. Or
yes, Chairman Hitchens. So we're available for any questions that y'all would have.
I don't see any from any of the committee members.
Well, thank you for your support and your continued financial support, and we're available at any time.
Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate all you do. Okay, moving right along. Department of Public Safety, Colonel Wright.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you fine. Let me get to your page. Okay, I got you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor for us to be here this morning. Thank y'all for y'all's time. We appreciate the support, and we certainly appreciate the reinstatement of the $2.5 million for our fiscal amended budget 2021. Mr. Chairman, we support the governor's recommendation for a bond package in the amount of $775,000 to purchase a FLIR system for one of our helicopters and to provide an upgrade for our downlink system. Once this additional FLIR is added, all of our 407 aircraft will be equipped with the FLIR capabilities. DPS also supports the governor's recommendation for a bond package of $56,410,000. Stevens for a new headquarters construction. Stevens and Wilkins Architecture was selected as the architecture firm. Turner Construction was selected as the construction firm. The plans are complete, and we're currently in the design development phase and are preparing the construction documents. The site has been prepped and is ready for groundbreaking. The new facility will be located on the same site as the old police academy on our complex, which is located further back on the property. The construction time is estimated to be between 18 and 20 months. DPS also supports the governor's recommendation for a bond package in the amount of $655,000 for the acquisition of one mobile tower and the construction of 2 stationary towers. The mobile tower will provide us an opportunity to set up temporary communications when we lose a tower or communications in a particular area. The 2 stationary towers will be located at Post 20 Dublin and one at Post 14 Cockwood. These new 300-foot towers will tremendously enhance our communications in the middle and southwest areas of the state. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to direct your attention to the budget tracking sheet, line 39.4.1. The Department of Public Safety supports the governor's recommendation of almost $3.2 million to assist with funding one 75-man trooper school. In fiscal year 2022, we're scheduled to have 3 trooper school graduations. The 110th, which started in January of this year, will graduate in September. We're currently recruiting for the 111th trooper school. This school is tentatively set to begin in August of 2021 and will graduate in April of 2022. The 112th trooper school is tentatively set to start in January 2022 and will graduate in April of 2022. Our plan is to start both of these classes with 100 cadets in hopes of graduating 75 from each of them. The 112th school will be our first accelerated trooper school. It will be specifically for applicants who are currently post-certified with at least 2 years of law enforcement experience. They will graduate in 13 weeks compared to the traditional trooper school model of 32 weeks. We're simply removing that basic mandate portion of the school because they've already undergone this particular training. This will save money on lodging, meals, and salaries. We believe the accelerated school consisting of cadets with prior sworn law enforcement experience will improve our trooper school graduation rate. The Department of Public Safety Board unanimously approved the implementation of an accelerated trooper school model yesterday during our board meeting. The accelerated model will not take the place of a traditional trooper school model. It will simply be an additional alternative. In addition to the accelerated trooper school, we've recently adjusted our uniform and appearance policy, which allows candidates to join our team that have tattoos that can be covered by our Class A uniform, which is our most professional uniform, our long sleeve uniform. We hope to encourage more applicants with prior military service. These are men and women with real life experience, something we desperately need in our agency right now. These are just two examples of how we're continuously evaluating how we can increase our recruiting levels. As you know, recruiting is an ongoing priority of our agency. Trooper school is very challenging. Our experience has shown that many cadets fail during their first attempt at trooper school, but succeed at their second attempt. We've retained 17 of the cadets that failed out of the 110th, but have expressed a continued interest to become a trooper. We utilize the cadets in other areas of the agency. Doing so allows us to retain them for the 111th school. This saves us money with recruiting and the rehire process while filling vacant job needs within the agency. It also helps us better acclimate these employees to our agency. Because recruiting and retention remains a significant priority, we look forward to working with this committee and with OPB on initiatives that will help us retain current members and recruit future employees. Mr. Chairman, I respectfully request the committee's favorable consideration for the governor's fiscal year 2022 budget recommendations. And at this time, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Let me ask you one here. I saw how many you retained and how many dropped out of school. Were any of those as a result of COVID when they arrived? Didn't some arrive with COVID?
Yes, sir. We did lose a couple of those cadets to COVID.
Are they some that were retained that want to try again?
Yes, sir, they were.
You know, and I have firsthand experience. I think all of you know, it's just tough anymore to recruit people in the law enforcement, and it's not just with the state patrol. It's universal. It's a tough job, and you know, when I started, we were some of the most respected people in the state, and there were 3,200 people that applied for 31 positions when I came on in 1969, and it was about as competitive as you could be. I made 100 on the physical fitness test. I was straight out the Marines, and a 97 on the written test. And, you know, had I done just 2 points lower, I would have never made it. But in this day and time, we have to go out and actively recruit, try and come up with incentives. And we still have a problem at midterm with people leaving. Something that's never happened before is that we have state troopers with 8, 10, 12 years that leave to go back to local agencies. It used to be all the local agencies wanted to come to the state patrol, and I can go on and on for some of the reasons, but you know, I appreciate what you do, and I know it's difficult, and I looked, you know, I looked at the tattoo policy. I think I went through the ringer about 10 years ago with doing appropriations here, and there was a lady in there that really was pretty curious about me because we wouldn't hire people that had tattoos, and we had a couple that we did the same thing. They were required to cover them in some fashion with long sleeve shirts, but you know, they couldn't have them on the face or the neck. And South Carolina has been doing the abbreviated school with sworn law enforcement officers for many years. aware of that, and I thought that was a good program. And I hope that'll open it up to experienced people who want to move up. But I've told you, and I've told people in the legislature, the retirement is the real issue. I read a white paper the other day from the Peace Officers Association of Georgia, and I was a little astounded that, you know, we've lost 3 or 4 troopers that I know that have gone to Texas, and the average pay in Texas for a trooper is $89,000 a year, and they retire with 25 years at 80%. And it's pretty tough because everybody in state government's the same now. They get that 1% a year. You work 30 years, you get 30%, and the pay is pretty good, but the retirement continues to be an issue, and I don't think it'll be changed in the foreseeable future. So I wish you luck. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, hearing none, I appreciate what you do, and thanks for participating today.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up is the Department of Juvenile Justice.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can everybody hear me okay?
Hey, Commissioner Oliver, good to see you again.
Yes, sir. Good to see you, and an honor to be here before you in the committee this morning. And I'll just start off, and we're on tracking number 31.1.1 on community service, and we support the governor's recommendation on all of our requests today. But start off in the community services, it's a statewide adjustment to increase funds to reflect an adjustment in the employer share and teachers retirement system for 19.6% to 19.81%, and that's $1,208. Tracking number 31.3.1 is secure commitment, which is our YDCs. Again, it's the statewide adjustment for the teacher retirement system. Jumping down to 31.3.2 and on our YDCs, increased funds for teacher training and experience at $94,531. And as you know, as statutorily, we're mandated to compensate our certified staff for certification and credible years of service. And this has not been done before in the past. And so traditionally, if you go into a regular school system outside of DJJ, which we are, but if they're outside DJJ, they will receive those step increases. And so we're requesting that funding and supporting the governor's recommendation on that. 31.3.3 and the YDCs also is utilizing existing funds to implement a 10% increase for juvenile correctional officers and secure facilities. We're going to be doing that by freezing a total of 110 positions in the YDCs. 31.4.1 and secure detention are RYDCs, again, that statewide adjustment for teachers retirement. 31.4.2 in our YDCs, again, was for the teachers training experience adjustment. That's $132,579. And lastly, 31.4.3 in secure detention or RYDC, utilizing existing funds to implement a 10% increase for juvenile correctional officers. And how we're going to be doing that is freezing a total of 187 positions. And so with those 10% increases, the total positions that we're going to freeze 297, and we're currently, and by doing so, we still have approximately 420 vacant positions available to fill across the state. Next, I'll move on to our bond package. And again, we support the governor's recommendation on all of our bond packaging. And we'll just move into the number 2 on the item. It's facility maintenance and repairs at $3 million. As you know, we have an aging fleet of facilities. And so that $3 million can go towards maintaining and maintenance and repairs for those. Item number 3 is Muskogee YDC is the request to construct a 22,000 square foot, 56 bed housing unit and the demolition of the 2 frame cottages that sit on that campus for a total of $13.7 million. And I just want to just stop here for just a second, and also it'll be the same thing for the Augusta YDC. We're reducing our footprint at these 2 campuses, Muskogee and Augusta, which I'll get to in a minute. So currently, Muskogee has a 60-bed campus on there. We're constructing those new units at 56 beds. We'll be losing about 4 beds, but we can handle that capacity there. As you know that facility is aging, it's cottage style, it'd be better to manage the youth in our care there if we have everything under one roof, and then also it fits the best practices under the youth and custody practice model that we're currently under. Item number, also at the next item down, number 4, Augusta YDC, so construction or the design and commissioning of our new academic building there on the campus. It's in pretty bad shape. As you know, we operate our own school system. Our kids go to school there, and that building is in really bad shape from our security system, our HVAC, our plumbing, and other infrastructures there. So that's $900,000 request in the bond package. Also at Augusta YDC, as I mentioned, for Muskogee's, the request to construct a 22,000 square foot housing unit, 56 bed housing unit on that campus. Right now we have 100 beds. We would take those 100 beds offline, bring on that 56 bed housing unit. So we'll be losing 44 beds, which again, to fit best practice in the youth and custody practice model, we'd be able to manage that population a little bit better and be able to provide positive outcomes for those youth if we have them all under one roof and in one setting. And that's 11.7 million. Item number 6 in Loftus RYDC to utilize site improvements due to DBHDD closure. As you all may be aware that we share property with DBHDD at Loftus facility, and our campus sits on the back of that. And so we would just have to utilize those $5 million for funding to continue that site. Next up is number 7, the statewide system. It's the high security contraband detection system that we're going to try to pilot in a couple of our facilities. This will eliminate the need for strip searching. It's a contraband detection system, kind of like an X-ray machine, so to speak, to detect any kind of contraband that the youth may bring in, and making sure that we operate in safe and secure facilities. And you know, a lot of our kids that come to us, they have trauma and they endure trauma, and also it can reduce on PREA allegations and staff assaults. So utilizing this $1.1 million to implement this pilot program to see how it works, I think would be beneficial not only for our staff but for our youth as well. And I'll, Mr. Chairman, that will complete our request, and I'll entertain any questions that you or the committee may have.
Any questions for the commissioner? I got a couple here. How many juveniles do you currently have?
Currently, we have across the state. Currently, we have about 890 today.
And historically, is that going up or down?
It's going down since 2013 when juvenile justice reform. Those numbers are going down. COVID has kind of slowed that down a little bit. So pre-COVID, we were averaging about 1,000 statewide in secure detention, and still about 10,000 to 11,000 in the community.
And I'm sure you've heard the talk about changing the age for juvenile. Affect you both monetarily and introduce them into your system.
Yes, that will have a tremendous effect on us. I've recently pulled the data for the 17-year-olds that were arrested for 2020, and it was a 4% decrease in that total. It was 5,127, and out of that, 2,936 were misdemeanors and 2,191 were felony arrests. Compared to 2019, the total number was 5,355 total 17-year-olds that were arrested, with 37 being misdemeanors and 16 being felonies. So there was a 44% increase in felony arrests amongst those 17-year-olds. And so I went back and asked the GBI again to break down those felony arrests to see which out of those 21, about 2,200 felony arrests, how many of those would be considered the 7 deadly sins. And it was about 268 of those were considered 7 deadly sins. So that would have a significant impact on our system. Just to kind of give you a brief synopsis of what that looks like. Last fiscal year, we had about 7,000 youth that moved through our YDCs. And so adding that additional capacity, if you just take out, you know, the misdemeanors, I think that'll be another significant increase if we were just looking at the felony arrests, about 2,200 potentially moving through our system.
And I used to know this, but I don't know that a lot of people on our committee know. As I recollect, probably 10, 15 years ago, I had an interest in for juveniles versus adults. to be incarcerated. And I think it was like $100 a day for a juvenile, where it was about $30 a day for an inmate because of the added requirements you have for juveniles for education, healthcare, and that kind of thing. Is that kind of similar still, or?
It is. I want to say we did the analysis last time. I think it's about $100,000 per child per year. So whatever that breaks down to right now, that's where we're sitting at to provide the services to our youth that are in secure detention.
And you don't know corrections, do you?
I don't know about corrections.
They're coming on here in a minute. I'll ask them when they come on. But any questions? Okay. I thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Next up is the GBI.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. The director sends his greetings from Quantico, Virginia, where he's attending an FBI executive meeting. I appreciate y'all letting me address you. I'm going to try and share a PowerPoint that we have for this meeting today. Do y'all see my PowerPoint that talks about appropriations?
Sure do. I do.
All right, sir. I'm addressing line item 30.1.1. I can talk about any of the other items like bond projects, but I was told that specifically this was the one that the committee is interested in. It's the governor's recommendation of $270,320 for the expansion of the legal division within the Bureau. As y'all know, last year we passed, y'all passed 3534, which added duties and expanded the ability of attorneys within the Georgia Bureau of Investigations to be sworn in as special assistant DAs and special assistant U.S. attorneys. Well, we've hit the ground running thanks to our prosecutor liaison, Jarrett Usher. And in addition to the responsibility she's taken on as a special assistant, our legal department answers all questions coming from agents within the Bureau. It answers questions outside the Bureau concerning the sex offender registry, open records. They had their hands full. What we're asking for in this and what the governor is recommending is that we add one attorney, one paralegal, and one secretary. I would like to make note that up until 2 years ago, we did have the secretary and the paralegal position, but it was done away with. This bill will help get it back to us. And even before taking on the duties as special assistants and helping out prosecutors across the state, our legal department had their hands full. With this budget, we're going to be able to do the duties of the legal department, as well as what's encompassed with the expanded effort across the state to help out our fellow prosecutors. And I believe I heard Mr. Skandalakis say that the backlog is about 50,000 cases. Well, of those 50,000 cases, a number of them are going to be some of the higher end cases, the RICO cases and the drug cases. And that's where we've been specializing since last year. And just to give you kind of a flavor of what we're doing within the Bureau to assist our fellow prosecutors across the land, as you can see, we've been actively, we currently have 4 cases of which we're involved in, 2 of them which we're sworn in on that have almost 100 defendants. One of them has taken place up in Northeast Georgia. I think it's about 8 to 9 counties that it spans, 63 defendants. That's Operation Rural McCoy. It's a RICO drug trafficking organization. Another one is Operation Cage Dove down in Upson County. There's 46 defendants, and that's a RICO gang indictment. In addition, we've been instrumental in providing assistance and ground up support for a human trafficking and child sex trafficking ring down in Upson County, Georgia, as well as another RICO gang indictment in the Habersham County area from a gang that was coming down the Aryan Brotherhood from Tennessee. And altogether, those represents 100 defendants that were actively involved in assisting prosecution of, having drafted the indictments, doing all the motions. In addition to those new external efforts that we're undertaking, we're still doing our internal case review and investigations. We're doing training and education across the state on best anti-gang practices. We're doing the internal commitments that I've talked about as far as providing legal assistance and review on existing GBI cases that have nothing to do with the expanded effort. So along with these increased duties, we are also, just to give you kind of a snapshot of what Ms. Usher's doing in our legal department, assisting in drafting in the search warrants, subpoenas, other relevant legal documents, handling all first appearance hearings, first commitment hearings, bond hearings. We've drafted indictments in the hundreds of pages, drafting and responding to all pretrial motions, bond motions, additionally, negotiating bonds, plea terms, attending every calendar call, every arraignment for every defendant in every jurisdiction. We're poised when courts get started to handle all the trials. We're handling appeals and will handle all the appeals, both written and arguing before the courts. In addition, we're also taking on the role of asset forfeiture in these cases, overseeing wiretaps, which can go up towards thousands of pages. And speaking of that, we're also compiling, serving and reviewing discovery, which in the cases that I'm talking about number in the thousands and thousands of pages, as well as taking on the responsibility of victim notification itself. When it comes to asset forfeiture, we have 3 interim complaints currently in civil forfeitures, which involve 20 plus firearms, more than $100,000 in currency, 7 vehicles. We have seized more than, well, actually it's more than 120 kilograms of methamphetamine and a kilogram of heroin. So what we're asking for is the favorable recommendation of the governor's proposed budget so that we can keep on aggressively prosecuting gangs, large drug trafficking organizations, and continue to assist our brothers and sisters out there in the prosecution world. The way it would break down is the new position, the total cost for an attorney starting at 75 would be 139, a paralegal starting at 45 would be 77, and a secretary starting at 32 would be 56, and that comes up to the total that the governor has recommended, and we're asking you to adopt. That being said, I'm happy to answer any questions or go through any other thing that y'all wish me to go through.
We have any members of the committee have any questions? I've got a simple one here, having been around the GBI for about 50 years. How many attorneys do you have now on board?
Sir, we have 2 attorneys in legal division. We have our prosecutor liaison, Ms. Usher. So she's technically, she's with our legal division too. So that would be 3. The director, of course, is an attorney, and I'm an attorney as well with 25 years of prosecution experience.
Okay, I just remember when they had 1, and certainly this brings about a lot more efficiency in many of the modern day events that you become involved with. It's not like it used to be. So.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions?
I have a quick question, just an interest. Those external investigations, how do those typically come to the GBI?
Okay, so what's happened before, sir, is that we'll have a phone call from an agent or from the district attorney himself asking if we could come in and get involved in the case. In the situation up in Hall County with the 63 defendants, we had a case agent who asked the district attorney if they would be interested in our assistance, and Mr. Darrow said absolutely. They have their hands full with an incredible backlog that they're facing right now. And for us to be able to take 63 defendants in one fell swoop was just a real blessing to them. So that's usually how it happens, sir.
Okay, no questions. We certainly appreciate you.
Thank you.
You do. The gang initiative certainly, I think, has progressed very well. I was the chairman of Public Safety Committee last year when we passed the bill that at first was very controversial, but like always, we were able to compromise and come to an agreement. So.
Good to see a friendly face, sir.
I don't know about that. Okay, next up is Georgia Firefighter Standards and Training, Director Gordon Henderson.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank y'all for this, the support in the 2020 21 adjusted budget and the funding we received there. And to give you just a quick overview of what we do, we handle compliance issues for the roughly 600 fire departments in the state. And we handle testing and certification and certificate issues for approximately 25,000 firefighters in the state. We have one request. That one request would be that the funding for the online testing would be continued into 2021 and would be increased to the actual level needed, which would be $150,000. And that would allow us to do the vast majority of our tests online. During the COVID stuff, we had to shut down testing pretty much just simply because we couldn't do face-to-face testing, and that's really all we've got at this time is a way to do paper tests. So we need to move forward and get into the most of our tests be online.
I didn't see that. I didn't see that on the tracking list. Is that the? Okay. 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 Any questions from the committee? Okay, we really appreciate you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
What do we got next? Let's push it all around here. Post, Mike Ayers. Are you with us, Mike?
Yes, sir, I am. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Sure.
As you know, sir, there are no changes to our budget for FY22. It has remained the same. Therefore, with your permission, I'd like to move further into some budget requests that I've discussed with you previously. As you know, the purpose of the Peace Officer Standards and Training Council, or POST, is to serve as the state's regulatory body overseeing the training, conduct, and certification requirement of Georgia's approximately 59,000 state and local law enforcement officers, correctional officers, juvenile correctional officers, community supervision, and communications officers. In these unprecedented times when police reform and accountability are at the forefront of public concern, the role of POST and POST Council are more critical than perhaps ever before. The public demands that our law enforcement profession be held to the highest standard, that the training of our officers be current and state of the art, and that our officers be held accountable for their actions through fair, appropriate, and effective oversight. In this legislative session, there is much discussion about police reform. As our lawmakers, you are no doubt focused on addressing these issues within our state. While in previous years, POST may have been seen as less of a priority, today in our current state and national law enforcement crisis, POST and its viability and relevance are of high importance. I respectfully make the following request, keeping in mind that these requests are based entirely on actual needs and not intended to be viewed as niceties or wants. Our current staffing allotment is inadequate to fulfill the responsibilities of this agency. Our actual operating budget is $3,871,100. Of that, $908,231 is awarded to the Georgia Chiefs Association and the Georgia Sheriff's Association and not available to POST. POST receives no other source of funding from either state or federal sources. We are responsible for the oversight of 29 training academies operating within our state. These academies are operated through the Georgia Public Safety Training Center, technical schools, colleges, state agencies, and large local law enforcement agencies. In our oversight role, POST investigates serious training injuries and deaths, training violations, and issues of academic dishonesty, as well as other rule violations committed by students and staff. POST is also charged with the responsibility of conducting annual training audits of each academy to ensure that the academies are operating within compliance of established POST rules. POST rules require that each academy be audited annually to verify the compliance with these guidelines and rules. Unfortunately, this mission cannot be accomplished at our current staffing level of one auditor. It is therefore become the practice of Post to allow individual academies to conduct self-assessments of their academy operation. The recent State Patrol Academy incident identified serious issues with this practice. An in-depth review of the academy operations revealed previously unreported issues with the management of the training academy that should have been identified through proper inspection. This issue alone has cost the state greatly in revenue and expanded man hours to address. It is imperative that this issue not be allowed to reoccur in the future at any of our academies. As such, we are requesting additional funding to hire and equip 3 additional auditors at an overall cost of $364,194, with an additional ongoing operating cost of $15,000. Post is currently authorized a total of 10 investigators. 1 position is currently being held open due to our current budget restrictions. We're requesting that vacancy be filled. On average, Post investigates approximately 1,302 cases annually. On average, each investigator is assigned an extremely large geographical area consisting of approximately 114 agencies per investigator. Cases investigated by Post range from relatively simple to the much more complex. 4 investigators spent more than 1,000 man hours investigating the operations of the Georgia State Patrol Training Academy and the circumstances surrounding the cheating allegations. Due to a large number of officer misconduct cases and current investigative staff, we are unable to adequately investigate many of the cases that we are given. Investigators find themselves reviewing investigative reports provided by host agencies and summarizing those details for the council to consider. Unfortunately, the cases assigned to our investigators sometimes are poorly worked by the host agency. This in turn oftentimes leads to the council's imposition of an inappropriate sanction. Society and our officers deserve better and demand that we quickly and thoroughly and accurately investigate and document those cases that are brought to our attention. We are currently failing in this investigation area, and investigations are currently taking too long to complete. This issue exposes the officer in question to increased stress and creates additional issues for their department in terms of unfulfilled staffing. In an attempt to improve in this area, Post is requesting funding to hire 2 additional investigators at a total cost of $242,796. Originally, Post held positions for curriculum specialists to review course conduct for accuracy and relevant content. Under OCGA 35-8-7, subsection 15, 16, 19, and 20, powers and duties of counsel generally, we are required to provide this oversight function. Curriculum specialists were taken from Post and reassigned to GIPSTIC in 1996. Curriculum specialists assigned to GIPSTIC are responsible for generating and reviewing training courses currently offered by the GIPSTIC academies. While this is an important function, there is currently no one reviewing courses offered by other academies, agencies throughout the state, or companies that sell training to agencies throughout our state. Under the current system, a certified officer or instructor may generate training classes to be taught throughout the state without adequate Post oversight. There is no method to review the quality or accuracy of these courses, which could expose the trainer, a company, or an agency to liability. Post is responsible for approving these courses and awarding training hours without the benefit of being able to review the actual course content. This practice is ripe with potential to expose the officer to inadequate training and inaccurate information. Post requests the approval and funding to hire 4 curriculum specialists to address this need at a projected cost of $354,704. Post computer systems operate under Windows 7 program that is no longer supported. The state's cybersecurity awareness team has encouraged all state agencies to purchase Windows 10 software. Our current computers are unadaptable to Windows 10 and would need to be replaced. As such, Post requests funding to purchase 20 computers with Windows 10 software at a cost of approximately $18,000. With the ever-growing threat of cybersecurity, we also request an additional position in our IT department, which would be the position of cybersecurity technician. As our client base grows, so do our needs in technical security. This position would have a starting salary and benefits of $79,500. Finally, as a primary function of post, it is our requirement to sanction officers, many of which become agitated at the loss of their ability to continue in the law enforcement profession. These officers may be highly trained tactically and in the use of firearms. Additionally, post is oftentimes selected by individuals who bear ill willing and ill feelings toward law enforcement officers in general. It is our concern that our facility has no reinforced entry points. The office doors are hollow core residential style doors, and all glass windows are not reinforced or strengthened in any way against thrown objects or gunfire. We request serious consideration to be given to installing improved doors and windows with an estimated cost of $75,682.20. Mr. Chairman, that is our request, and I thank you for your time, sir. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Are you still in the facility at Austell?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any questions from committee members? I really don't have any for you, Mike. You know, I served on post for 12 years, and I understand most of what you were talking about. And I remember when it started. I think it was like 72, and the implementation of post has certainly done a lot to improve the professionalism in the law enforcement community. I used to make fun of the fact, I come from South Georgia and was down in Ludowici and McIntosh, and when there was some corruption down there, and we used to say some of the people down there with driving around with lights on top of their cars were more corrupt than the people they were trying to arrest, and it certainly has cleared it up, and we appreciate what you do. And the AG told us when we were over there that we were too hard on people, that so many of them appealed, it jammed up the courts, and we needed to be a little bit more lenient. But I think the rank and file people believe that you need to remove problem law enforcement officers from positions of authority and get them out, because time and time again, if you don't, you see them come back, and it's a revolving door. They go from one small agency to another one, and y'all do a great job, and I appreciate you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, Department of Corrections, Commissioner Ward.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, fantastic. And thank you to the Appropriation Committee, and give me an opportunity this morning to present fiscal year 22 budget recommendation, okay? And we're gonna begin on page 24, House Bill 81 tracking document. The first item on page 24 is in section 19.2, and that's item 19.2.1 is an increase of $897 to reflect an adjustment to an employee share of teacher retirement system. I think we still got one teacher left around, so we're paying for that person, okay? Next is gonna be on page 24 is probation detention centers program. That's section 19.3. Item 19.3.1. This item is language concerning the opening of a new 50-bed dorm at Bacon PDC down in Alma. This language is to move offenders and staff from other locations to support the operating expense of this new dormitory. Next is item 19.3.2. That's to transfer a total of $3,016,262 from the state prison program to cover the costs associated with a rate increase for our residential substance abuse contract. Okay. Next is health services, section 19.5, item 19.5.1, and that's an increase of $1,193 to reflect an adjustment in the employee share for the teacher retirement system. Again, that's just I think it's one employee we're paying contribution for. Next is the state prisons program, section 19.8, item 19.8.1. And that's an increase of, again, $9,382, reflecting adjustment in employee share for teacher retirement system. Item 19.8.2, this is language concerning the opening of 4 new dorms at Metro Reentry Facility in Atlanta. These will house over 400 additional new TC beds that will open up there. And this language is to move offenders and staff from other locations to support the operating expense of these dorms, new dorms. Okay. Item 19.8.3. That's again transfer $3,016,262 in timekeeping solution savings to the detention centers program for that contract increase for that substance abuse contract for RSAC. Item 19.8.4, and this is what I call the real big shot in the arm, and this is the authorization to use existing funds to support a very well needed 10% pay increase for our correction officers. That will increase the starting salary for a correction officer at a medium security facility from $27,936 to $31,040, and then also a correction officer 2 at a medium security prison, that would push that salary to $34,144. And then for those well-deserving officers that are more tougher, close security facilities, their starting pay will go from $31,040 to $34,144. And then a correction officer 2 at a level 5 facility, their pay will go from $37,558. Again, this is a game changer for us as far as recruiting and retention in these facilities to make sure we take care of those well-deserving correction officers. Next is the transitional center program, and that's on page 25, section 19.9, and that's going to be item 19.9.1. This item is in language concerning the opening of a new 100-bed dorm down at Smith TC, and that's in Claxton, Georgia. This language is to move offenders and staff from other locations to support the operating expenses of this new dormitory, and that is another big shot in the arm down there for that community. Next, I would like to go over our bonding fund recommendations. And also this year, our bonds were consolidated into 3 major categories. The first being $15 million for emergency repairs. And that, again, that's emergency repair for our boilers, chillers, and heat loops when those things go down. Next is the second bond is $15.6 million for security improvements. And that's all our hardening at the facilities and everything that's related to technology and CCTV in that category. And third is our major repairs and renovations. That's $14.9 million. So our bond request package is a little bit over $45,590,000. And that's, again, thank you for the governor's recommendation for getting us such a nice bond package to keep these facilities up and running like they should. And Mr. Chairman, subject to question, that's all I have right now, sir.
Do we have any committee members with questions? I got a couple for you. When you implement this pay raise to vacant positions, how many additional vacant positions will you have on board?
We have over 1,000 positions, so we're going to have vacancies. So we're be in really good shape.
But if you have 1,000 now and you use the money, how many positions is that you're going to use to implement the pay raise? You have that figure?
Oh, okay. Well, I have to get that back to you. What's the cost?
Okay. What about how much does it cost per day now to maintain an adult inmate in the prison system?
It costs us about $65.84 per day, and that's roughly average about $24,031 per year. But right now, it costs about $65.84 per day to house an offender with us.
And this is just a comment. I don't know what kind of new timekeeping system you got in the state prisons, but you need to share that with some other agencies. If it's $3 million, I don't.
Well, you know, we were on that old PeopleSoft timekeeping software, and it was a 2-week lag. What Chronos is giving us real time timekeeping right then and there. And you know, if you know, after 171 hours, you know, we had to pay time and a half. And what was happening, you know, had a 2-week lag. It was kind of hard with the old system. It's kind of hard to keep that up. But right now, with the Chronos timekeeping system, a warden can pretty much see who's coming up and going to be over that 171. Again, we're not denying anybody overtime, but we're able to better manage it now and spread that wealth around a little bit. And then also we're accurately making sure that if a person working, he's getting paid for time work, not just fluffing on the timesheet.
Okay. With the no questions, we appreciate what you do.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. And the man we've been looking for from the Office of Highway Safety, Director Poole. You there, Alan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
If you look at the track sheet, we'll follow the track sheet at 3910. You with me, Colonel?
I'm with you. Yeah, my last page, I've got it twisted around here somewhere. I'm moving them around.
There's nothing on it.
Oh, there's nothing on it. Okay. Go ahead, Alan.
Okay, Colonel, if you look at the $3,424,848, that's the highway safety budget and driver's education budget. So what I wanted to share with you all, if you can look at the screen, up on your screen where it said the original FY21 budget, GOHS in 2020 was $631,410. Now, if you look at the 10% cut, that's what the governor asked for. That would have been our cut at 10%. However, we were cut by 18.31%, which was $115,615. So the difference of the 10% and the 18.31% would have been $52,474. So we felt like if you would indulge us, we are trying to get back the 8.31%, which is the $52,000 a year, which is our base budget. And down here in this line item, Colonel, if you look at that 510,953, that would have been the entire 18.31% cut. So we're asking for that 8.31%, which is 52,474, to be issued to us to make our base balance budget $563,427. That would include driver's ed budget and the different monies that we get from other funds, and our budget would give us the $3,424,000. So we're only asking back to make us whole. We're only asking for the 8.31% back to our budget, and that would make us whole.
Okay. Any committee members have any questions?
And Colonel, let me just say this. We have 8 to 10 people that's paid out of our P&A budget. And the way this 510,000, we can't do our job with less than the 9 people that we take out of this 510,000 budget. So if we don't get restored back to where we need to be with this $52,000 that nobody else was cut but us, and the reason we were cut different was because we get funded pretty much by 80% of our budget come from the feds.
Right.
And if we don't get that put back in our budget, we're gonna have to lay off or do something because we just don't have the money for the personnel.
How many people do you have right now?
We've got 8 we got 9 people in P&A, but we got a staff of 28 people.
You have any vacant positions?
No, sir. And we get about $23 million from the feds in order that we disperse that throughout the state, which includes a number of, it's about 14 colleges, 28 police departments, 32 sheriff offices, 4 agencies, state agencies with 13 programs. We got a total of 108 grants. So we need these people to help us disperse this $23 million that we pull down from the feds. And we only got 28 people in the office, and we only pay 9 people from the state funds. So we need that $52,000 put back in our budget.
Okay. No questions? Okay, you're the man we've been looking for, I guess. You're the last one, so we appreciate what you do, Alan, and we're going to adjourn the committee meeting if nobody has any additional questions for me or any of the staff here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much.
Sure.
And committee members, thank y'all so much for indulging me for a couple of minutes. But I impose on you to please try to understand that we really need that $52,000. And that's just strictly the overage that we were cut in the beginning of the budget cuts.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate all the committee members taking their day off to sit here and listen to this. It's like I say, it's very important to a lot of different agencies, and it's important to a lot of our citizens that they operate and have the operating capital to do it effectively. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel. Y'all have a good weekend. Thank y'all, committee
Have a good
members.
rest of the weekend.